So every time I press the go live button on YouTube, after about 5 seconds, YouTube has this really annoying pop-up over the screen where it's like, why don't you inject an ad right now, right when you're going live, right when everyone is waiting for you to start the show. Every day, every time. I just want to make sure you all know that, because how stupid would it be for me to be like, welcome to the show, and then all of a sudden an ad plays. And that's apparently what they want me to do. So no, YouTube. Anyway, today was, there's a lot of crazy news. In Tennessee, they've expelled at least one Democrat so far, voted not to expel another. And these are because these Democrats engaged in insurrection. And there's videos. It's crazy. So basically, you've got these Democrats who joined the protest at the Capitol in Tennessee, where there was actually violence against cops and lawmakers. And now they're voting to expel them. So I think so far one is not being expelled. One has been expelled. And this guy has a history of assaulting members of the Tennessee legislature already. We're going to talk about that. Plus, we're getting rumors that conservative district attorneys are contacting GOP reps to figure out how to indict Joe Biden because, well, the doors have been opened and this is where we're going. And then we got a whole bunch of other crazy news. There was another mass shooting was thwarted by law enforcement. This is a trans individual who had a manifesto. The Post Millennial has the story. We have Rebecca Jones out of Florida turned in her own son because he was threatening to commit a mass shooting. This is crazy. And she's a Democratic candidate, very much hates DeSantis. And then, of course, we have the Anheuser-Busch controversy. So a lot to go through. Travis Tritt? Is that his name?
Yep.
And Kid Rock. And I think John Rich and a whole bunch of other artists apparently are dropping all Anheuser-Busch products. The rumors are that internally Anheuser-Busch is freaking out because of the backlash. So, well, good. I think everybody should boycott all Anheuser-Busch products, not just because Bud Light is garbage, but alcohol is bad for you. So, you know, there you go. And Jack Daniels apparently too. So we'll get into all that. Before we do, my friends, today's episode is sponsored by our very own Cast Brew Coffee. Cast Brew is our coffee brand. It is officially in pre-order. We have 2 signature coffee roasts available. It will ship by May 5th. Roberto Jr. is the mascot, so of course pick up your Rise with Roberto Jr. Breakfast Blend or your Appalachian Nights Robust Dark Blend today to help support the show. We are sponsoring ourselves. We're going to start branching out, building new companies because we want to control companies. We want to make companies that do the right thing, that believe in America, that aren't going to back down, that aren't going to, complain about some young kid who happens to be wearing a shirt for your coffee company and then be like, we have nothing to do with that kid. Like, we don't want to do anything like that. We want to be outright just like good people selling a good cup of coffee and a bunch of other stuff too. So we have a cafe currently under construction, which hopefully will be open in a few months in West Virginia. I'm really excited for this. Also, don't forget to go to timcast.com, click that join us button, and then become a member to support our work directly. And you'll get access to tonight's members only uncensored live show at about 10 p.m. And if you do sign up, you can join the Discord, where if you sign up for at least $25 or you've been a member for at least 6 months, you can submit questions and maybe even call into the show and talk to us as part of the show. It's my favorite part of the night, to be completely honest, because it brings more and more people in. So become a member, support our work, smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show if you really do like it. Joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more is Tom Fitton.
Good to be with you. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Who are you? What do you do?
I'm President Judicial Watch, which is America's largest and most effective government watchdog group. We sue the government to get access to information. We sue the government when it breaks the law. And we represent whistleblowers and other victims of government oppression and abuse.
That all sounds like really good stuff.
It is. It's great. It's great to be happy to go to work every day.
Right on. Cool, man. Well, we got a lot to talk about, especially with what they're doing to Trump. So it should be interesting.
Yeah, he's a crime victim, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And of course, Hannah Claire Brimelow is hanging out.
Hi, I'm Hannah Claire Brimelow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com.
Hello, everyone. Ian Crossland here. Happy to be back. Good to see you.
And I am Serge.com. I'm ready to roll when you are, Tim.
Let's get it. So we have this first story from everyone's favorite state-funded, or what did Twitter call it? State-affiliated media. NPR. Tennessee House votes not to expel a second Democratic member over gun protest. So I chose NPR just because I love how they're going to smooth out the language here.
Anti-gun protest, is that
That's
what
right.
it is?
Yeah.
What was the January 6th? How was that then?
That was just a peaceful parade. Peaceful parade, yeah. All right, they say after
Costume
voting...
party even.
Costume, that's right. Costume party. After voting, the police escorts for people in costume. After voting to expel a Tennessee state rep for leading a raucous protest, from the House floor calling for gun law reform, the Republican-led body declined to expel a second member. In a 65-30 vote, lawmakers failed to pass a motion that would remove Rep. Gloria Johnson, who represents about 70,000 Tennesseans in Knoxville. Cheers erupted, blah, blah, blah. Three lawmakers acknowledged they didn't follow the rules of order or decorum by speaking out without being formally recognized, but they're facing a disciplinary measure that's only been used twice since the 1800s. Gee, I wonder why it is that they're going after these here protesters. Could it be, is it this story I have right here? Here we go. From 2019, activist Justin Jones banned from Capitol after alleged assault on Speaker Glenn Casada. Oh. So it was an insurrection, but I'm gonna skip over the pleasantries, and I'm gonna skip right to the part where I talk about civil war, and I'll explain it in this way. A few years ago, an individual was, I believe, arrested. I want to make sure I get that right. I believe it was banned from the Capitol, and let's see, blah blah blah. Justin Jones, 23, was charged with 2 counts of misdemeanor assault and 1 count of disorderly conduct after authorities say he threw a cup of coffee into an elevator, striking Casada and Rep. Deborah Moody, a Republican from Covington. Jones, a Vanderbilt student, and more than a dozen other protesters assembled outside the House chamber on Thursday to protest the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest, a Confederate general. So this is 2019. He actually attacked members of the legislature, and then a few years later, he's in it. So, I wouldn't call throwing coffee at someone like a caning or anything like that. But what I think we're continually seeing with the indictment of Donald Trump and where everything is going, is that the bifurcation of American culture is now within the confines of our state and federal governments, to the point where you actually have a person who physically attacked Republicans in office. You'd think that would have been news in the first place. It's like, hey, remember that guy who attacked the legislature? He got elected. He's here now. Well, now he's being thrown out again. He's being expelled. And they're saying you can't keep him out. He will be back. I can only imagine that as we see more of this at the state level, combined with the false charges against Donald Trump, we are heading towards, whatever you want to call it, this country being split in half.
Well, it's one. I would consider it to be one part of the country has decided just to leave in terms of refusing to follow the basic principles. I call it the American way. We have this rising communism within the Democratic Party. They reject what we all have believed in, or we Americans have commonly approved of, which is the rule of law. We have a Republican form of government. We don't vote by mob rule, which is what they try to do in Tennessee. Another basic respect for civil liberties and civil rights. And the communists don't believe in any of that. They're rejecting it. So, they'll try to overturn a legislature in Tennessee. They'll try to attack the Supreme Court here in Washington, D.C. They try to jail their political opponents in the form of Donald Trump. We see this now with the January 6th grand jury investigations, where they're trying to jail people for exercising their First Amendment rights under the state federal constitutional law to dispute an election. So, they're kind of throwing out the window all the sort of norms that we used to believe in. The divorce is they're abandoning the family. They believe, or even better, even worse, trying to destroy it.
They believe might makes right. That's it.
Well, it's the communists. They can call themselves whatever they want. They're not going to call themselves communists, Marxists.
Well, a lot of them actually do.
Right. But, this is the left. This is the totalitarian impulse of the left, and it's been unhinged. And I've been observing politics for longer than I care to admit to. Rarely would I say something is communist. But, we're facing this communist revolutionary moment over the last 2 years, 3 years. And I don't know. We're an undiscovered country when it comes to that.
What my favorite part of this is? We have this story from the Daily Mail. Biden blasts shocking and undemocratic Tennessee House of Representatives for vote to expel one of 3 Democratic lawmakers. So if you, as a lawmaker, join a violent, call it a riot, because they were fighting with cops, and they were actually blocking a legislator in the bathroom, and he had to be like hugging police officers as they try and pull him through an angry crowd screaming and yelling. Biden calls it undemocratic to remove the people who did that.
Right.
So what would you call January 6th?
What would you call your Justice Department trying to jail your predecessor for a speech where he told people to go peaceably protest about the election? So Biden is approving of an insurrection in Tennessee while trying to jail Trump on pretextual charges for inciting violence in Washington, D.C.
And the problem is, I see that conservatives keep trying to argue with the left about why they're right. And it's like, bro, they don't care.
Yeah,
It's
The
purely
left's
power
not trying to win you
politics.
over. I mean, if you look at the news coverage of the Tennessee event, I mean, USA Today put out this huge, like, the coverage of what happened at Tennessee is completely wrong. Don't believe any of it. These right-wing commentators are crazy. They're perpetrating rumors. Even with Justin Jones in the chamber, they were saying, oh, it's an impromptu protest. They didn't plan it at all. It's just that they had supporters in the balcony and they strategically knew when to get up and start protesting on the floor. I mean, they are telling you one story, not to win conservatives over, but to completely solidify their base.
I'm not saying they're trying to win conservatives over. Of course they aren't. I'm saying conservatives are trying to win them over, and they're pretending like it's possible. Or for some, maybe not even that. For some reason, there are conservatives who think that facts care about feelings. That that Ben Shapiro standing up and speaking at a university is going to convince people. Some, but very few, right? This show, the work you do, you go to these people and show them evidence and they'll go, oh, wow. And then what they'll do is they'll take the information and they'll be like, they're on to us. We got to adjust our strategy and try and find a different way to exploit and gain power.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that the way to think about what Ben does, what we're all doing really, is we're trying to educate the American people and showing leadership for those of us who are concerned about these issues. The left, as you point out, isn't going to be convinced, but we got to speak out and provide leadership and the truth and let people know there are people who know what's going on, and this is the way forward.
But I get that. I'm saying there are people arguing with leftists.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, there are no standards. I mean, the big question I've been asked about on the news recently with the Trump thing is, what about the double standards? As if they care about double standards. There's one standard. Jail them and protect us
the one
as far as the left is going. I mean, they're being perfectly consistent, which is no rules. We go after you and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right. And then where it's what we're talking about with Dave Smith, the Republicans are the Washington Generals and the Democrats are the Globetrotters. That's been an analogy for several years now. The Democrats pretend like Republicans are running circles around them when the Republicans do literally nothing. And then the Democrats steamroll everything, quite literally indicting Donald Trump on nothing.
And two impeachments
Over nothing.
And they're still nervous about impeaching one of his cabinet officials who is partly responsible for the most significant human trafficking operation in the history of man, the crisis at the southern border. I start talking about Biden impeachment, people get very nervous in Washington, D.C. Let's have an inquiry into what Biden's done. I mean, we had news not even 2 weeks ago.
Well, I mean,
that further confirming that millions of dollars were laundered through the Biden family enterprises from the Chinese communists. Has there been any leadership from the House on pursuing impeachment for that? It doesn't mean they're not doing some good investigative work here. But to me, there's this urgency and there's this crisis related to the rule of law. Our republic is tottering. It is tottering. And we need leaders that recognize the problem and respond with the appropriate urgency.
I think we're past that point. I mean, with what's happening in Tennessee, with what's happening with Trump, I mean, and especially with Trump. But I think it's important to point out Tennessee shows the more grassroots level of things, the state level, the local level. It's happening there, the bifurcation. Donald Trump is the first former president to be indicted. And the charges are completely bunk.
Right.
Even Chris Hayes on MSNBC is like, there's nothing here. I mean, the statute of limitations is up. What is this? They're doing it anyway because they don't care. They're making their moves in slow, gradual ways that are difficult to defend against. And Donald Trump, in my opinion, should not have surrendered. He should have said, file the paperwork, let me know. And then when the media came out and said, there's two things they would have gained by this. The media came out and said, this indictment is bunk. Trump would have been like, well, I don't know what's going on. I mean, MSNBC said there was nothing here. So what am I supposed to do? He could have used them. And if they do want to pursue it, knowing there's no underlying crime, so the statute of limitations is up, they would have to contact Ron DeSantis' administration for extradition. And if DeSantis did extradite Trump, he would be out of the GOP primary like that. Trump would completely just knock him out and have nothing to worry about. But DeSantis probably wouldn't do anything. And knowing that, what would end up happening is Trump would be sitting in his home. He'd say, I don't know anything about this. They're free to file whatever legal paperwork they want, and we'll read it. And then when Bragg fails to get any support from the cultural left, fails to get an extradition, he'd be sitting there confused saying, what do I do? No one's going to be, and like only the weirdos on Twitter are going to be calling for escalation. So Trump would have just been like, I don't know what happened to that thing.
Well, the weirdos on Twitter seem to be running our establishment these days. I mean, Bragg, but his extremist approach here, with the help of Lanny Davis, an old Clinton lawyer who's representing Michael Cohen, that lawyer he brought in from the Biden administration, who's a longtime Obama hand, and these other leftists, and the Soros approach to governance, which is to abuse the justice system to target your political enemies. And that's straight out of the Twitter sphere, that sort of crazy anti-Trumpism, and it's so dangerous. And I say there's like this storm front all across the eastern seaboard, from Georgia, Fulton County, same crowd, same specious allegations trying to abuse Trump for disputing an election, up here in Washington, D.C. with Biden and his Justice Department targeting and harassing Trump, and up in New York. I tell you, I think he's going to get indicted in multiple jurisdictions. And
Trump?
Yeah, and I tell you, Republicans have got to understand that this is a crisis that deserves urgent attention. They should be cutting off funding to the Justice Department as appropriate to curtail these abusive investigations, defund New York more or less, defund Fulton County, Georgia more or less. Every power available to them under law should be used to make sure that Trump isn't kept as a political prisoner.
Check out this story we got from the New York Post. At least 2 Republican district attorneys want to prosecute Biden's, according to Rep. James Comer. I mean, that's it.
Yep.
He says, I had 2 calls yesterday, one from a county attorney in Kentucky, one from Tennessee. They were Republican, obviously. Both states are heavily Republican. They want to know if there are ways they can go after the Bidens now. Bring it on. Just unleash it.
Yeah.
Every single person who lives in a conservative district should be contacting your local prosecutor's office and saying to them, I want you to indict Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, or all 3. You pick. Oh, boy. Should we go through, Tom, you want to throw out any random examples of what we could possibly indict any one of those 3 for?
Well, I know one of the brothers for Biden is or had been living in Florida.
Oh, you got Ron DeSantis right there. Come on, baby.
Yeah. And
Well, so
I talked to the New York Post over the weekend. I said, all bets are off. You're going to have district attorneys in Texas and Florida. If they're doing their job, they're going to be thinking, what is the hook into the Biden crime family?
All right. My big thing is I want to see Barack Obama criminally charged for murder for the killing of Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki, the 16-year-old at the civilian cafe that was blown up. Now, Dave Smith mentioned they'd have to arrest Trump and Bush and Biden and Clinton and go back to Bush again for if they're going after war crimes and things like that. And I'm like, well, okay, and he agrees. But let's wind things back.
Right.
Let's go tit for tat. They indict Trump on complete bunk BS. Is there anything you've seen in what you do that you think is immediately indictable for the Biden family?
Oh, sure. I mean, I've interviewed Rudy Giuliani, who's a national expert on RICO. What you're seeing are the hallmarks of a RICO operation, and with Biden running it out of the vice presidency, continuing to benefit from it afterwards.
For those that don't know, can you break down RICO?
Well, the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. It's usually used against the mafia, where a family is run and you're kind of engaged in.
So you're saying 10% for the big guy was a bad thing?
10% of the big guy, right. And for instance, when Hunter is complaining that I'm giving money that I'm earning to Joe and paying all of his bills and Joe isn't reporting that. I mean, that's like something out of Sopranos, right? Yeah, we got to take care of, the uncle.
A parody of The Sopranos.
Yeah, well, and to me, it's so widely dangerous because it's a national security threat. I mean, we're we've got this civil war mentality here in the United States these days, unfortunately. But think if you're Putin, think if you're Chairman Xi looking at what's going on here. First of all, Biden's on the take because he's in your back pocket, more or less.
You have Bob Yalinsky saying he is.
Yeah, you've got the Moscow mayor's widow, oligarch, giving money to the Biden family. Burisma was a Russian-leaning company, by the way, so they've got that Ukraine angle. And then the Chinese, $35 million last I checked in money going. So they've got him on the take. So does it mean that, Biden is taking a call from Xi saying, what should I do? No, but when you're doing their calculuses, how is the U.S. going to react? Well, we do know Biden's corrupt, and we know he's corrupt because we've got the goods on him. So we're going to do things in a more aggressive way than we might otherwise, like invade Ukraine or put extra pressure on Taiwan or send a spy craft to attack the United States and do figure eights over our military and watch him do nothing because we got his number because of our corrupt dealings with him.
It's what they claimed Donald Trump was compromised by Russia, or worse, a Soviet asset. And the funny thing is, Russia didn't invade Ukraine while Trump was president. Russia, if they did have compromat on Donald Trump, would have been like, what's he going to do about it? But they didn't. Instead, when Joe Biden gets in, they do, and Biden's just like, better just funnel a whole bunch of money into this country. I think they know, in this instance, it's more about Joe Biden lacks the wherewithal to actually lead this country. The people around him also don't have the wherewithal. Afghanistan was a complete disaster. And more importantly...
Well, that was Trump's fault. Are they going to indict him for that after today? Yeah,
they've got DC, the feds going after Trump, Georgia. I think they're going to go after Trump on a bunch of different charges. And I think, if I had to make a bet, he's going to get convicted in New York.
And that wouldn't surprise me either. And I would say every active Republican and every active conservative and dissident liberals out there should be worried about their personal liberty. All bets are off. There's nothing too petty. You've got these political prosecutions all across the United States. This poor guy who got caught up with the immigrant or the illegal alien on his property. They're trying to prosecute him. This guy who ran into a crowd of protesters. He thought his life was on the line. They're prosecuting him.
Which one was that?
This is just in the paper recently. I think Cernovich had a tweet on it. I retweeted it.
Do you know where it was?
I'll check my Twitter.
Let me pull up. But keep talking. I'll pull up Cernovich's tweet.
And then you had the pro-lifers who were being targeted by the Biden administration. And then the January 6th protesters, where they're not just focused on protesters who beat up a cop or hit a cop over the head. They're going after protesters who committed misdemeanors by being in a part of the federal property they weren't supposed to be, parading. That's never been prosecuted this way. So, and what's the basis for? What's the distinction? Well, they're just Republicans and conservatives. I was there for the Kavanaugh hearings, Justice Kavanaugh. It's just like Tennessee. It was violent. People were afraid. The left was intimidating and disrupting proceedings. And they got $50 tickets. So, we've got this effort where the left and its leadership in the Democratic Party too often endorse violence. Now, I don't know any Republicans out there in a leadership position that endorse, condone, and ratify violence. Do you? I don't.
No. So
I do know it's endemic in the left.
I do think I have the story you may have referenced. Is it this one? Daniel Perry's 911 call played in court?
Is this the guy who drove into a crowd and ended up having to kill someone?
I don't think I think he, quote, I made a wrong turn. A guy pointed a freaking weapon at me and I panicked. I don't know what to do. I'm just an Uber driver. I made a wrong turn. I've never had to shoot someone before. They started shooting back at me and I got out of the area. I'm scared. I'm terrified. I'm worried they're going to go after me. I've never had to defend myself before. They're charging this guy, isn't it?
Yep.
And he's accused of murder. Yep. This guy, they went up to his car, just a regular old Uber driver. Yep. What did he have? He had an AK, didn't he?
I don't know the nature of the weapon he had.
I'm sorry, man. I said this 5 years ago. I said, you, the regular citizen, keep thinking that you will keep your door closed and keep your lights off and you will cross your fingers that the mob walks past your home. They won't. And when they do firebomb it and you call 911 and say, for the love of all that is holy, please save me, they will show up to your house, walk into your house and arrest you for insulting the mob because 2 cops can't deal with a riot, but they can deal with you. And if the rioters are screaming and threatening violence, the cops are going to say, well, if we don't arrest him, they're going to firebomb buildings. We may as well just arrest him. We saw this with Dan Dix, who is a reporter in Canada. A bunch of far leftists started threatening him, and the cops grabbed him and said, if you don't leave, we'll arrest you. And he's like, what? They attacked me, and they were like, shut up and leave, or you're under arrest. This is only going to get worse. Yeah. This guy's mind. You're an Uber driver. I want everyone listening to understand this. You're driving home from the grocery store. You picked up your milk, your bread, and your eggs. All of a sudden, a violent mob of mask-wearing individuals with weapons surround your car, bang on it, and one guy points a gun at your face. You defend yourself. Now you're in prison, attempted murder, and the far-left extremists, they're letting out the real criminals. And this wasn't this in the Gulag Archipelago? They're writing about with the criminal, when the criminal's caught with a weapon, well, it's a mistake. They don't know better. It's in their nature. So we'll take the weapon from them and say, no, you don't do that again. But if you understand why you had the weapon, you're going to the gulag.
Right. Well, and you it kind of goes back to the Rittenhouse prosecution, which was obvious self-defense, but you had politicized prosecutors up there trying to make an example of him for exercising not just his constitutional right to defend yourself, but your God-given right to defend yourself. I mean, this is, we have to recognize these rights that the left says, argue about whether the Constitution covers them or not. No, the Constitution recognizes these rights that we had prior to the Constitution and codifies them. And that goes to the Second Amendment right. And the 14th Amendment, which is also caught up with the Second Amendment. People think it's just the Second Amendment. The 14th Amendment, equal protection of the law. And that's not something we're all being provided right now. Trump is having his civil rights violated 6 ways to Sunday. Equal protection of law. Does anyone think that Trump is given the equal protection of the law with them coming up with laws that have never been enforced before or applied in such an outrageous way against him simply because of his politics? The terrible times.
The country is, we're in a 5th generational civil war. And I don't know how you can look at what's going on and think anything else. It is not as the American Civil War went, with one state being like, I hereby secede, another state being like, oh, no, you don't. No, it's various factions of influence gaining control. And what we have seen consistently over the past decade is the weaponization of the office of law to crush anti-establishment and conservative individuals. And it is escalating and getting worse every day. When I said this stuff 5 years ago, we weren't looking at a dude about to go to prison because Black Lives Matter pointed a rifle at his face. And he's the bad guy. If you're the victim and you fight back, you go to jail. Right. Just like that guy in New York. And you know what? I think these DAs know they're doing it. You can't have a story like this Daniel Perry guy. High profile. It's been several years. You can't have a story like that and then get the story out of New York where the parking garage attendant gets shot twice.
Right.
Wrestles the gun away. He doesn't have a gun. He wrestles the gun away from the guy who's trying to kill him, shoots him, and he wakes up handcuffed to a hospital bed being charged with attempted murder. Bragg knew what he was doing. They want you to know, if you dare fight back against the crime they've created, they will punish you.
That's right. And every police officer in the nation already knows that, which is why there's been more restrictive policing, less aggressive policing, because they know if they get in the wrong situation and they have to defend themselves or get into a situation where it's disputed their use of force, their lives are over. So why would you voluntarily put yourselves in situations of peril like that? And as a result, laws go unenforced and the bad guys win. And I don't mean ideologically the bad guys. I mean, they do win because they support insurrection and crime because it helps build the revolution. But the bad guys who victimize cities in the criminal traditional sense are running rampant right now in Washington D.C. Every major city, crime is impairing significantly people's right to live safely.
We just had that story about that guy. What do they call him? Crazy Bob, I think his nickname was.
Yeah.
Co-founder of Cash App and Square.
Yeah.
He leaves San Francisco because of how bad it's getting and moves to Miami. Goes back to SF for a business trip. 2:30 in the morning, murdered in the street.
Was
Crazy.
it in the morning? I thought it was the middle of the afternoon. Was it in the morning?
I thought it was 2:30
2
a.m.
It was
2
in,
a.m.
it was in the evening. Yeah.
And you know what the scary thing is? He took two stabs to the chest, and then apparently there's surveillance footage showing him holding his chest, walking around begging for help. And he goes to a car and lifts his shirt up and begs for help before dropping dead.
He called 911 and was like begging for help.
You know what worries me about this is I'm wondering if he died because he punctured his lungs, and he didn't know how to protect himself from a chest sucking wound.
Yeah. How many people would?
I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an EMT or anything, but it's not like you have plastic wrap or anything. But my understanding is you can just jam your fingers in it, create a vacuum to keep yourself breathing. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know. I'm just saying.
And you never know how you react in that scenario.
Well, I mean,
and I'm not making fun of your point, but what sort of insanity that we would talk seriously about having MASH training? Being living in an urban environment.
I'm from Chicago, so like when I was a kid, I was told what to do if someone's suffering a chest sucking wound, and they explained to us you take a piece of plastic wrap or any kind of plastic and you tape it down on 3 sides to create a vent. So when someone inhales, it actually closes the cavity and forces air out of the wound so they can keep breathing.
Yeah.
And then I don't know
it's
if
like a diaphragm of some type. Yeah.
I don't know if jamming your finger in the wound to create a seal would work as well, but to keep you alive temporarily, because when you puncture a lung, when you inhale, air doesn't actually move in or out, so you're not getting air and you don't know. It feels like you're breathing, but nothing's actually happening, and then you die. So I hope that's not the case. But anyway, I digress. This is what's happening in our cities. I doubt there will be any justice there. And my understanding is this guy was wealthy and powerful, right? He was a tech bro. He was a tech mogul guy. Founder of Square. Square's worth a lot of money.
And Cash App.
And Cash App.
Yeah, he knew.
Stabbed outside his like luxury apartment building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was in the middle of it wasn't like a tough area of San Francisco, was it?
I think all of San Francisco is a tough area now.
No.
Now it is, yeah.
It's crazy. And so there was another story. I don't know much about it, but I was talking about this the other day because I'm hanging out at the poker tables at Maryland Live Casino, and the guy to my left told me his buddy starts talking about politics. Someone mentions like money. Someone mentions the economy. He says, Joe Biden gets mad. And then he mentions a buddy of his in 2020 was driving with this girl in a pickup truck when they get surrounded by BLM who are banging on his car. So he hits the gas, runs some people over. They chase him down. He calls 911. He just got convicted of attempted murder. I don't know the full details of the story. I looked at the guy's name. There's no news coverage of this, and it got me thinking. We've seen stories like Daniel Perry's, where he's an Uber driver confused.
Right.
We saw that story out of Provo, Utah, where a guy's driving his truck. BLM runs up and just shoots the guy for no reason. Shoots a guy. I think he shot a guy in the arm. Might have been a woman. How many of those stories have also happened where there was no video footage, and so we've not heard anything? So when I looked up this story of this guy, what did I find? The media just says he ran over a bicyclist. That's it. There's nothing else. Because there's no footage showing Black Lives Matter and Antifa trying to kill him or his girlfriend.
And on top of that, we have this this kind of craziness with the transgender extremism, which is obviously a violent movement. It's a tool of the left, of course. They just arrested someone else seemingly.
Well, let me pull up this story and we'll get into the final details. I'll add to that. There's an overlap between the left and the transgenderism ideologues, like the gender ideology thing. And there has been a high degree of violence we have seen coming from many of these individuals. But they also talk about it openly with like Stonewall. They say it was trans women throwing bricks at cops and things like that. So it's no surprise that you got that horrifying, tragic event on Monday. Let's jump to this story from the Post Millennial. Breaking. Trans male arrested for planning Colorado school shooting had anti-Trump manifesto. Whitworth faces charges of attempted murder after allegedly making threats against schools in Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is crazy. So this is a biological male who is trans-identified. His name is William Whitworth, was arrested and charged after police investigation in Colorado Springs revealed the 19-year-old was responsible for threats involving schools in Colorado Springs Academy District 20. The Heber County Sheriff's Office charged Whitworth with 2 counts of criminal attempt to commit murder in the first degree, criminal mischief, menacing, and interference with staff, faculty, or students of educational institutions. Now, apparently, I would say based on this reporting, this must have happened well before the mass shootings that we saw in Nashville. However, when this individual in Nashville is being called a victim by the Nashville protesters, insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol, they held up 7 fingers.
Right.
Symbolizing that the individual who committed the mass shooting was also a victim. How many more people of leftist persuasion will think to themselves, if they do this, they will also be celebrated?
Well, transgenderism, the extremism, it relies on violence to get its way and the air of violence. When you tell all your supporters and folks going through this, like this young man, that critics of you or those who don't share your views are their criticism is violence,
genocide.
You know, it puts a target on people's back. That you don't agree with me, that means you're violent, and if you're violent, you don't deserve protection, and I can defend myself against you. If you're a fascist, you're outside the protection of the law, and we can go after you and be violent with you.
And this is how they frame it. They frame it as though it is self-defense.
Right.
When you say words.
Right.
So,
if words are violence, you're all a target, America. You're all a target.
It's hard for me not to see a martyrdom component to this too. Like if you feel like you are depressed and you've got all these questions about who you are and your gender, and your online community is telling you there is a need to take action now, that in some way you might find that you are pursuing, basically immortality through a terrible act, and that, for the rest of us would deter you from doing this. But if you're in a psychologically disturbed state, you see it as the ultimate call to action, which is tragic, and it can really...
It's terrible. Imagine if you've been ripped away from your biological reality. But that's what's happened to these folks. They've been caught up in the thrall of this extremism, and everything that people rely on to get through life. I'm comfortable. I'm me. I am what I am.
There's no sense of like true north. Because everything.
And of course, that's the communist way, right? They want to take everything away from you. So you rely on them and their ideology ultimately. And that means tearing apart the family, the institutions that compete with the state, religion, and also tearing you away from your biology. I mean, that would be the best victory for the left.
Well, think about...
Nothing is certain. And the only thing is certain is this consciousness that we will raise for you through the Marxist revolution.
I think it's poised to shift at any moment into who knows what. There's no reason, in my opinion, that it stays with just the gender issue, because we've also seen transracialism and things like this. Now, they've been slow to actually accept it, but it seems like they may be getting towards accepting it because, according to their ideology, they have no choice but to accept it. Right? The argument being that if anyone can identify as whatever they want, if a person appears white but agrees with them ideologically and claims to be black, then they must be. They are. And so the door has been opened completely to even transracialism.
Right.
Now you're starting to see universities...
And that blows up our anti-discrimination laws, right?
Yeah, that's the funny
Tim,
thing.
if you go in there and you identify as a black-owned business, who's to say you're not?
Well, Serge is African-American.
That is correct. I am. Yep.
South Africa.
South Africa,
yeah. Well, I understand, but and that they kind of deny, they're rejecting all these fundamentals. They don't believe in racial equality. They don't. They believe in racial discrimination.
They absolutely do not believe in racial equality.
And I tell you, this transgenderism, the targeting of children, and the endorsement of mutilation of children, I mean, that's demonic. And if there's a way to kind of denote something as being good versus bad, the targeting of children in this way, and the endorsement of it by our political class, countries can't survive destroying their children.
Let's put it simply. In Scandinavian countries, they have stopped gender affirmation, as they call it, for minors. They have stopped it. The countries the left claims are the bastions, the examples of good healthcare, have said, hey, this actually was not helping. Yet for some reason, and I think it's because the left is a cult. It doesn't matter what's true and correct. It doesn't matter what's logical. What matters is they gain power. And the cult says it's so be it. Mm-hmm. Even if they want to come out and say Sweden and Denmark are so great. Okay, well, Sweden and Denmark said stop doing this. No, they won't.
Well, I'm convinced that you can't, an adult for themselves or certainly for a minor, cannot give informed consent to this transgender, surgeries, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that it's allowed both legally or medically is a problem that has to be dealt with. But no one can do it under traditional medical ethics. No doctor can do it, and it shouldn't be allowed legally.
But
adults and children, because it's like someone going into a doctor and saying, "I want you to cut off both my arms." That should not be allowed to happen. And the idea that someone can ethically do that as a doctor, or that someone can consent to that under traditional standards of informed consent laws and ethics, it's at odds with everything we know about medical treatment.
But see, the question I have with this when it comes to adults is, what is the ethical line? And so I can certainly understand removing someone's arms because that makes them dependent to a certain degree. But if someone goes in and says that they want to be sterilized, they can still use their arms to eat, sleep, work, and do whatever. I mean, if a human adult wants to split their tongue or get tattoos or remove an earlobe or whatever, it's kind of like people do a lot of weird body modification stuff.
Well, what is the treatment? What is the treatment they're seeking, and what is it designed to solve?
But
the doctors can't just do medical procedures that don't work.
But my issue is what is the line to which someone is allowed to modify their body surgically?
I don't know what the line is, but I do know. I mean, just because I don't know what the line is right now doesn't mean that it ought to be legal to have you go in and have a doctor mutilate your body to treat your transgender dysphoria. That's the opposite of what should be done medically, and it should be prohibited under law, just like other radical surgeries would be prohibited in similar circumstances.
What about tongue forking?
Well, I don't know what the medical treatment is. What's the consequence of that happening? And frankly, it's not something that doctors typically do, is it? Or is it something that can be done outside of a surgical procedure?
I'm not entirely sure. There's also magnetic implants.
I tell you what, I'll let you do tongue forking if you stop mutilating babies and children and allowing adults to have their private parts torn apart.
But we're not talking about kids in this context.
Well, I'm talking about adults having their private parts torn apart.
But they're choosing it. It
doesn't matter. No one can sensibly choose that.
I think you have to talk about why, right? Like if an adult woman knows she doesn't want to have kids and she wants to get sterilized, okay, maybe she does have a reason to go in and get a hysterectomy, right? But a lot of the justification for the genital mutilation or the genital modification done to adults or children is we're preventing suicide. And the idea is that death is worse than potentially, living without an organ, being dependent on hormones, anything like that. I think if you want to get your tongue forked because, you want it and it's not going to potentially completely impair your life forever, then that's a very different thing than saying, if you don't let me get my tongue forked, I will die, because you probably won't die.
Sure, but that's an entirely different argument. I mean, if someone went to a doctor
you can't
and said simply, so I know people who have gotten hysterectomies because they said they want it done. End of story. Have a nice day. I don't care. And then they've gotten the surgery. And it's like, you're a 30-year-old adult. You've made the choice for yourself. You will not have kids, but you can still walk, run, jump, eat, sleep, work. The only thing that's happening is you can't reproduce anymore. It's kind of like, people get their tubes tied all the time. People, get vasectomies. The question is, what's the line? Now, cutting off someone's arms, well, now you're creating an issue for society where someone's going to be requiring assistance. And that is like, okay, that's That's where the line is that I see. I do think that there's a problem with people.
I just want to be clear. No one can give informed consent to gender mutilation surgery. No one can give informed consent. So the law can't allow you to do it. Doctors can't lawfully or ethically do it. And certainly government shouldn't be subsidizing it and promoting it with children. Because if you allow adults to do it to solve a medical problem, right? Well, why? Well, what if a child has a similar quote medical problem? The suicide. Now, this is another big issue. So we now give you whatever you want in terms of medical treatment because you're so far gone psychologically and emotionally, you could commit suicide otherwise.
That started in the 90s with the opioid problem.
That's like a hostage situation. That's not medical treatment.
They started to have to treat pain.
But I don't want to conflate the claiming children can get sex changes with a legal adult doing whatever they want.
Well, they conflate it. So you need to understand the relationship.
But I totally get it. And so I have a line there where I'm like, do I think people who are adults should undergo body modification at all? No, I think it's all bad. But okay, if you're gonna go, get strange body modifications because you want to look or feel a certain way, it's just kind of like, I don't know, man. That's just me. I've never been staunchly conservative in that, but going after kids is the line.
I mean, look at this Dylan Mulvaney, right? Everything he's about is the targeting of children.
Absolutely.
Everything he when he talks about my 365 days as a girl, what adult female? Maybe I don't know enough adult females.
He's saying girl. Yeah, he's already talking about minors.
What adult females go around talking about girls in a regular way, other than in a joking way? He is not joking, and he acts like a teenager. He acts like a young female. He does
not act like a teenager. He acts like a little girl.
Well, he doesn't even act like any. He doesn't act.
He acts like a caricature.
A caricature of what he thinks a woman or a girl is. But he's targeting children.
Let's jump to the story from Billboard. Travis Tritt cuts all Anheuser-Busch products from his tour rider following brand's trans-inclusive campaign. So it's not just Travis Tritt, I believe. John Rich, Kid Rock, obviously. And apparently many others, Travis Tritt is saying there's many other artists who are just totally getting rid of Anheuser-Busch. We're also hearing that tons of liquor stores, bars are getting rid of Anheuser-Busch products. We heard that I think it was in St. Louis. No, it wasn't. It was in Missouri somewhere. They shut down a Budweiser Clydesdale event because of the backlash they've been receiving over the sponsorship of Dylan Mulvaney.
So what is the sponsorship? Now, I think this is something you can educate people on. So is he sponsored in the sense he gives in cash, or does he get cash for selling it on?
Estimates are $50,000 for Dylan Mulvaney to do a video drinking Budweiser.
So does he get cash from people viewing it?
No,
or does he get cash up front?
Budweiser called Dylan Mulvaney and said, we will give you $50,000 to make a video.
Oh, so he got money just to do what he did.
Because he's an influencer. They're paying for time.
11 million followers.
Yeah, they're paying for time on his social media.
So he's not getting a commission. He just got the money.
Just the money. So I want to stress this too, as I often do. I do not believe that Dylan Mulvaney is a transgender individual. I believe that Dylan Mulvaney, if you look at, I talked about this earlier actually. Dylan Mulvaney is phase 2 of what is known as ElsaGate. It is the next level of what ElsaGate is. Are you familiar with ElsaGate?
No.
So when YouTube enacted its algorithm, or to a certain degree, the algorithm got to a point where people were using computer programs to auto-generate videos that would fall in line with the algorithm to maximize viewership so they'd make money. What ended up happening was there was a wave of videos of...
God bless America.
Well, it wasn't America.
But you know what I mean.
It was mainly India, I believe.
The market works. Yep.
There were videos emerging where Elsa was eating feces out of the toilet, getting injected with blood syringes, and giving birth. Then there was the lesser videos where it's like the Joker, Spider-Man, and Elsa were running through houses and doing weird things. But many of the videos depicted strange little cartoon people eating and drinking out of toilets, being injected and having other grotesque things done to them, bleeding from their mouth, teeth being ripped out. And it was because these things
triggered the
algorithm.
Yeah.
So when parents would give their iPad to a baby and press play in a nursery rhyme and then leave, they hear some woman being like, "Hello, little baby, let's sing a song." And they're like, "That sounds wholesome." They leave the room. The video ends 5 minutes later. YouTube then autoplays whatever fits the algorithm. After about 5 videos, you are in the insane world of Elsa eating feces. This is ElsaGate. This is what happened.
Yeah.
So what happens with Dylan Mulvaney is that TikTok makes an algorithm. Dylan Mulvaney was making a series of content like animals, nature, didn't work. Did a coming out as a non-binary, got a few 100,000 views. Did a full-on day one of being a girl, got millions of views. Dylan Mulvaney then says, ding, light bulb, this is what works. Dylan Mulvaney then decides to pursue this course of content and then slowly begin the process of doing drugs and whatever to fit that mold to make money. Hence, Dylan Mulvaney prancing around in the woods wearing high heels is not something a trans individual does or a woman does. It is a caricature, and it is a real-life version of ElsaGate. The algorithm mashed these things together, and Dylan Mulvaney said, if I do this, I'll get clicks. So to any sane adult, seeing an adult human male taking hormones and getting surgery, putting on high heels and running through the woods, you'd be like, okay, hold on, this is really, really weird. But all of these different things combined make the algorithm promote it so this individual gets views and then pursues doing more of it. This is what Bud Light sponsored. So for most of us, we are sane, rational adults. We see Elsa eating feces and we go, something's wrong. This is not right. Kids should not be watching this. We then see Dylan Mulvaney and say, okay, this is not what women do. This is really weird. What is this? But young people don't know the difference. So when babies were being fed ElsaGate, they just watched it. When young preteens and teenagers on TikTok see Dylan Mulvaney, they just watch it.
But where are the adults in Budweiser say that? I'm assuming the way it works is they've got their marketers, right, who are in the thrall of whatever, faddish social media, especially to the more to the left, the more politically correct, the better. But isn't there an adult who says, no, we don't do this?
The adults are millennials.
You can't do this.
The millennials are running
I think this is all fear-based decision-making.
No.
My view is the leadership of Anheuser-Busch needs to be held accountable for allowing this to happen because I think they know better. And they're afraid of the thugs in their own offices who impose this thinking on them.
I think it's going to get worse, and I think it's much, much, much more simple than that. The 35-year-old woman who got promoted 2 years ago to a marketing manager for Bud Light is running the room right now and saying, this Dylan Mulvaney has 11 million followers. Let's do this campaign. That's all that happened. The people at the top, the executives at Budweiser, probably older Gen Xers and some boomers, probably have no idea what the campaign was, but they certainly learned about it now. And now they're saying, what is going on? And it's going to get worse. Millennials were raised on these algorithms. It was 10 years ago. It was 15 years ago. We're talking about 2006, 2007, the emergence of social media algorithms. People who are getting out of college create an existence on Facebook where they're fed nothing but this intersectional feminist garbage because the algorithms were sending that kind of content. If the only thing you see for 10 years is that the United States is white supremacist, then you are going to live in a world where that's true. You've seen nothing but evidence proving it. Now you're 30 years old. You're working you're working at a low entry level position at Budweiser, at Anheuser-Busch. Now you're 35. You've been given a promotion. You are now head of marketing for your division. It's that simple. And then this person is in charge and they fill it out. Now it's possible. The rumor is that at Anheuser-Busch, they're reeling from this and the executives are furious at this person. Someone posted the LinkedIn for the woman who runs marketing, I guess. And it's like a 35-year-old millennial woman. I think what's going to happen is there may be a reprimand here if enough people boycott Anheuser-Busch products to the point where they're forced to issue an apology. If they don't issue an apology, they'll wait for it all to blow over. But if conservatives and anti-woke individuals hold out for a long enough period of time and say, we will not buy any of these products, and then the end of next quarter comes and their stock drops because of it, their share prices, then they issue an apology and that creates cultural ripples. However, it is going to be a Gen Zer who replaces this millennial woman, and that Gen Zer is going to have more hyper-radical views. It is not, in my opinion, that some guy at Anheuser-Busch was like, we should go after young people and hire Dylan Mulvaney. It was a young person hired who said, this is what's popular. Mm-hmm. Let's do it.
Do you remember a couple of years ago, I mean, probably a long time ago at this point, there was that Kendall Jenner Pepsi ad that got a lot of backlash where there's like a protest and magically Kendall Jenner solved.
She saves the day.
She saves the day
Kendall
by,
Jenner?
I don't know what her name
Kendall
is.
Jenner.
But she like passes over a Pepsi can and everything is good. And that was widely denounced as being, you know,
So brave.
ridiculous, so brave, just mocking sort of social justice efforts, whatever. I worked at a PR firm at that time, and we had a whole discussion as a company on it, being like, what did we learn from this? That this was a terrible idea? Great. How could we have stopped this? Literally talking to anyone else in the room. But it's, you know, they'll have these marketing teams that are like, I think this could be cool, and we could get Kendall Jenner. And they're like, oh my gosh, great idea. And none of them can see past it. So what they know is that Dylan Mulvaney is trending. And they're like, well, might as well jump on this bandwagon. They can't see the consequences because they don't expect them.
I disagree. It is a millennial woman who likes Dylan Mulvaney.
That's what I'm saying. It's all the millennial women in the same room being like, Dylan Mulvaney's cool.
Right.
So it'll work. It'll be fine. And they're not thinking about the consequences because they only
cool
sell
would
to
it be
themselves.
if we got Dylan Mulvaney to drink Bud Light for March Madness? That is brilliant. Oh my God. And now you've got some 58-year-old dude in the upstairs being like, what is Kid Rock doing? He's shooting our product. Why is he doing that? And they'll be like, well, because you've got this histrionic sociopath drinking your beer. And now people are pissed off.
Who was buying Bud Light? I don't think they have any.
What about the Nike ad?
Oh yeah, but let me put this simple for everybody to understand. There are a lot of people on the left who are like, but it's so great that Dylan Mulvaney's having fun and drinking beer. Okay, how would you feel if Bud Light did a sponsorship of InfoWars and Alex Jones came out with a pack of Bud Light and said, Bud Light sponsoring the show. Thanks, Anheuser-Busch. You're the best. And then he stabs it, shotguns it, slams on the ground, rips his shirt off. We'd probably laugh, right? But the left would lose their minds. Sponsoring someone who is culturally divisive is probably a very bad idea, which is funny because companies tend to avoid those sponsorships. It's cancel culture. They're like, if we work with this company, you know, we're going to get in trouble. So going for Dylan Mulvaney was like, what did Stephen Colbert call it? Sticking your dick into a hornet's nest. That's what he called it 10 years ago with H.B. Gary. I'll use the same analogy. That's what they did.
Yeah. And I think because they don't have anyone who's actually buying their product in their marketing rooms when they're having this conversation, no one is like, that's a bad idea. They're all talking to each other. They all watch the same kinds of content online. And so therefore, they're all attracted to the same influencers. And in this case, it's a radical, divisive figure. But there's no one in there who probably drinks Bud Light regularly who is like, this won't sell to anyone. Please stop immediately. There's no check and balance system in the marketing agency.
Yeah, and if it were only just an advertising controversy, it'd be one thing. But, you know, you had the Supreme Court cave into the transgender extremists by refusing to protect women and girls in West Virginia from having to compete against boys.
That's temporary, though. I mean, that officially hasn't gone through its ruling. This is just saying that rule can be enforced right now.
No, that the rule can't be enforced right now.
The rule can't be enforced
so kids right now
pending
are
further litigation.
Right,
I mean, we haven't even seen Patrick Morrissey argue in front of the case yet.
But, you know, typically the courts intervene when there's a likelihood of danger. And this is dangerous. To celebrate Easter, evidently, the Biden administration just issued a rule demanding all federal funded programs or sporting programs refuse to protect little girls by requiring males to be allowed to participate. So this is a fanaticism. And as I keep on saying, it's a dangerous extremism because it relies on this implication of violence by your opponents. And it focuses on grooming children.
I want to jump to this other story. You were mentioning a moment ago that the left they don't actually care about racism, or I forgot exactly how you phrased it, but basically the view is the woke left, they're actually very racist. And then I have proof. We have this story from Bounding into Comics. Dungeons and Dragons to remove half species from player's handbook claims the entire idea is inherently racist. Wow. So let me put it simply. The idea that there are mixed race species in the world of Dungeons and Dragons they deem should not be in the game anymore because it is racist.
Oh, yeah.
They are saying that race mixing is racist.
You don't think that's the reason, half the reason for the hatred for Clarence Thomas? Clarence Thomas is married to, I'm friends with Ginny Thomas, a white woman.
AOC.
And that is a major issue for them.
Sort of. I mean, AOC's I don't know, fiance or husband, I don't know if they're married, is white, and Kamala Harris is married to a white guy or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, what is AOC's ethnicity?
she's what is she? She's
Latina.
She's a Latina, but I don't know like of what persuasion. But she's not white.
I mean, the left considers Latinos white if they vote Republican.
And they consider black people white if they vote Republican too.
So I don't know. That's why I'm confused.
But so this one was really funny to me when I saw this. Wizard of the Coast revealed that they will be removing the concept of half species from the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook on the grounds they are not comfortable including an inherently racist concept in the game.
What?
What's racist about mixed race characters? I
it's
wonder,
the opposite.
is something wrong?
Well, the racial fanaticism that really bugs me is the decision to capitalize black and white
Oh yeah.
in description,
Did
which
you
is
see that
straight
judge?
out of Speaking of African,
Yeah, that's
straight out of South African apartheid.
Did you see that that judge who I guess I don't know what the story was? He reprimanded the woke
The lawyer for
he
putting
said-
pronouns in the pleading. Yep.
He said you're adding extra words for no reason in an attempt to persuade an officer of the court by in making political implications. You capitalized the word black but not white.
Oh, that was a different one. Yep.
I thought that no, that's the same one. Same
Oh
one.
yeah.
And then it was like it was a prosecutor or something. He put pronouns in it, and the judge basically said that including your pronouns only attempts to signal to the court that you are of a political persuasion to seek favor.
I mean, we have a case in Minnesota, Public Teachers Union in Minneapolis. They put in a contract that, if there's a layoff, you get laid off, usually the most recent employee, the most recent hire, first in, first out, right? You don't have you have to be on the job longer in order to get the benefit of not getting laid off, except if you're black or white. So if you're a black person who otherwise would be fired, they go to the next person who's white and fires them.
Yeah.
And on the back end, rehiring, it's usually, the most senior person gets hired first, unless they're the wrong color. So there's this. It's not like they in favor of racial discrimination. They embrace it, and they reject the constitutional prohibitions on racial discrimination and the civil rights laws of the 60s. They don't believe in them,
Right.
folks.
It's been this way since I was a kid.
They don't believe in them.
This is how Chicago has always operated as long as I've been alive. This has been a component that friends of mine and my family have dealt with. That if you were white, if you were perceived as white, they would skip you in public hiring or public promotions, and that was normal.
Well, but that's an internal ethnic issue in Chicago versus a public school union with the endorsement of the city engaging in brazen.
No, I'm talking about police and fire department.
Right.
Outright saying white people need not apply.
Oh, right, with the racial quotas at the time.
Right.
In California, they had quota requirements for private boards.
Yeah.
They said you had to have. So if you have a quota means that someone gets a job that no one else can apply for because of their race or whatever the quota requirement
Yeah,
is.
that's a huge thing in South Africa as well. It's racial quotas. It's like one of the major things, honestly.
But in South Africa, do the quotas apply to white people?
Yes, it's like you have to hire. I believe it's like if you hire one white person, you have to hire 3 black people, and they could be black people of any tribe. It doesn't matter, but they have to be 3 black or colored people in that position. So no matter what, even if
this is important for people to understand. Colored means something specific in South Africa.
Yes, colored is a proper word, capital COLOURED, colored.
It refers to mixed race, right?
Yes, correct. Who speak Afrikaans is like their main language.
Yeah, that's funny because in the United States it's just considered like a slur or an insult.
Yeah, right.
But in South Africa it's like a legal term.
It's illegal. It's the name they use to refer to themselves. Yeah,
and it's capitalized. That's why I was talking about
yes.
the capitalization of race is pernicious. Like I keep on saying, they don't believe in any of the kind of, what the liberal basis for our country has been for the last 50, 60 years, that we're supposed to be treating people according to something other than their race or sex, or now, LGBTQ status or whatever. It's you get special treatment and others get punished. It is a how is it you run a civil society on that basis?
I have no idea.
South Africa tried it, didn't work.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's working.
Right. I mean, it didn't work under apartheid, and it didn't work in the efforts to undo apartheid, where they're as race conscious in theory as they were during the apartheid era.
It's more race conscious than it ever has been, I think, and it's not helping. It's never helped.
I just with this D&D thing, There's no other way to see it. They are white supremacists, and they are projecting to protect themselves. This is what the left does. They create segregated spaces. There was the famous library, I think it was Seattle, where they had POC, non-POC library meetings.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if you're white. When I was at...
I mean, just to remember, in schools across the country, they engage in segregation. Whenever you hear affinity space, sub-segregation. That's
Literal
what they mean.
segregation.
It's literal segregation.
In
court, or government endorsed segregation. That's what's happening to this day and age.
The parent in Georgia who sued because her child, who was black, was taken out of the mixed classroom and put into an all-black class, and she was like, "Why?" And they were like, "For his safety." And she's like, "What?" That's what they're doing. So these people are like, we shouldn't allow anyone to play a character who's actually mixed race because race mixing is racist, they say. Mm-hmm. They are trying to alter the culture to change people's perceptions. And it seems like what they
what sort of communism is that? I'm trying to think through.
Well, communists were racist.
I know, but there's communism behind it. I'm just trying to think through what sort of communism is it evidencing?
What do you mean?
That this racialism prohibits race mixing.
I don't. My point is, it makes.
I don't even understand it from the Marxist perspective.
Because there isn't one. The only underlying ideology to what they're saying is they don't want people to mix to race mix.
That's just like a vicious racism.
And they're doing it under the guise of fighting against racism. This is what they have always done. They say we are not racist. It's actually Larry Elder who's a white supremacist.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. Now
I read this article, I think in The Root, a long time ago, about a woman saying like we shouldn't glorify black men dating light-skinned black women or women who are not like black women of a dark skin tone because it's encouraging this idea that black women aren't enough, and they're. It was like this argument that I found very interesting because they're saying basically we want to see people of the same race together when it applies to this racial group. I mean, in Harry Potter, the people who were encouraging just purebloods were the bad guys. And it seems like in a couple years, we've turned away from this.
Well, and it's interesting because you have this, on the other hand, this kind of crazed commercial interest in depicting interracial families as if, to me, it's kind of reverse racism, as if they're too afraid to depict an entire black family or an entire white family. But the only reason a black person can get in a commercial if they're married to a white person these days. I mean, I mean, this is where we are. Yeah, and it doesn't make and I guess the communism is it doesn't make sense. It's disruptive. And the goal is to destroy the system. Well, I think chaos is key.
I think the communists were racist. Marx was racist. Shea was racist. Yeah. And they are racists. And what they're doing is they're encouraging policies that enhance racial tensions, and they actively promote segregation. They're white supremacists feigning a guilty conscience.
Yeah, the left has long used racial division to advance the revolution.
If I put it this way, Democrats, if I were to tell you that Democrats were imposing racist policy, if you were not American, all right, you'd never heard of the country, and you started reading the history of this country, then you showed up here on, you land at JFK and you walk out, and you're like, wow, America, first time here. And someone came to you and said, Democrats are racist. What would that person say?
Well, they're supporting race. Well,
a person who doesn't know, has read a book about the United States.
They'd say that is correct.
They would say,
they support.
Yes, I read this book. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. They supported slavery. They supported Jim Crow. They opposed the civil rights movement, and now they're reimposing segregation in school districts across the country.
Huh? And apparently people of leftist persuasion think race mixing is racist.
Yeah.
They don't really think it's racist. They just want an excuse to get rid of it.
The core love story of Lord of the Rings is a race mix. It's a human and an elf. It's
you can't have that.
Yeah, I could see in 20 years that they're like, we got to rewrite that. It's no good. This is Hasbro. Wizards of the Coast is owned by Hasbro, I believe, directly. And then they're funded by the Vanguard Group. Well, they're actually owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, Capital Research, Global Investors. The three of those companies own about 30% of Hasbro. Then there's this guy, Alan G. Hassenfeld, who owns 6% of the company. So it's like multinational corporations that are talking about how two people of different races finding love together or coming together. Is,
Right.
is
And they
bad.
don't want people to
crazy.
love each other. They want everyone to be angry at each other.
I get the whole idea.
Anything that suggests that you rise above in a spiritual or moral way, the divisions that, keep us, sinned or sinful, is something the left opposes. They want to raise everything that hurts hurts human beings.
I could get the argument.
Make that their basis.
If they were to say like, oh, well, it's because an orc took a human woman back to his tribe and raped, forced himself on her.
No. They're saying that to imply that an elf who is half human is only half elf is racist because he's an elf.
Oh, like they could call it a half human? It's because the whole game is written from the human perspective.
No, that's not what they're saying. They're saying
An elf has to be able to identify as a full elf.
Yes.
You can't treat them as an elf.
Negative.
Right.
You get elven abilities when you have an elven father. That's how it works. You get half. You get night vision. Just saying, you have infrared vision.
They are saying if a person is half elf, they are elf. That's it.
But not quite though.
That's what they're saying right now. I understand.
That's what they're trying to
Ian.
change it to.
They are changing it.
So they're saying what about a quarter elf?
Nope.
You're still an elf?
You're still an elf.
That would actually be illogical.
This is the racial tenets of the Democrats hundreds of years ago.
And
the one drop rule.
And we laugh at it, but the extremism is a feature. We say, well, it's a slippery slope. And it's like, yeah, we laugh, but they say, yeah, this is logical to us. And, you're going to get with the program, or we're going to make you get with the program.
I understand the human-centric thing, and maybe that's a mistake, because you could have like a half-orc, half-elf person. They don't have to be human. So maybe they should have went in that. They should go in that direction, where you could have like a dwarven elf, a dwarf and an elf.
I'm convinced.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I'm part of
Did you say you only get night vision if your dad's elven?
Well, elves have they have infrared vision. They can see in low light vision. They can see up to 60
but
feet.
it's only passed paternally?
Oh, either parent.
Oh, okay.
As long as you have elven blood, you have some of the elven ability. But I would love to see the game go like more race mixing, like a dwarven orc, a half dwarf, half orc kind of person.
That's too much for them, I guess.
Wouldn't it be amazing?
They wouldn't be comfortable with
What
that.
if my great grandmother was an elf, but my great grandfather was an orc, and my other great grandmother was a human?
They're just writing these kinds of characters out of the game,
Yep.
or oh my gosh,
And this is
that
funny
sounds
because
terrible.
if you go back in time to when there was racial segregation, the rules they imposed, the racists, was basically like, if any part of you is non-white, then you are not white.
Yeah.
And so they're literally implementing this right now. Like, you're not a human, you're an elf. It's like, no, but I'm half. No, you're not. You're an elf. Like, you're not human. That's what they're basically saying. If you have a human mother and an elf father, let's just. This is funny. Let's just say their ideology of what they're explaining. Let's replace human and elf with just like Indian and Japanese. What they're basically saying is that one group looks at the individual of two races and just asserts they can only be one. Imagine there was a kid, and this is how it works in the United States. Barack Obama is black despite the fact that he's half white.
Right.
That's the view of the left. He is not white, he is black, and that's in this world, that's all he's allowed to be.
Yeah.
To me, that's crazy. But that's how they've always viewed it, because they're racist.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, I'm holding out for the quarter elves. I want to see if they can see 15
Well,
feet.
I'll tell you
in low
this. I'll
light.
tell you this. When I was younger,
Is it racist or racialist? Racist, I'm always a little hesitant about the racism. Because
it is racist.
Because the racism suggests that someone has negative characteristics because of their race, as opposed to being obsessed with race per se and using that. And I'm being charitable, frankly. I'm just raising a point.
I think it is.
I believe it's generally racist.
It is.
But I think there's this broader issue of racialism that is part of the Marxist effort to destroy the country by categorizing us, whether we want to or not, and putting some people into good boxes and other people into bad boxes. And, what they run into, I think, in their racialism, and this probably explains this, is that folks of mixed races, they aren't quite sure what to do. So now they've got their rule, and you're going to go into one box or the other.
It's always
because
been
if
that
you
way.
straddle the boxes,
And
then
it's always been this way.
The whole
And
construct collapses.
It's always been this way, and it's never been you're one or the other. You're always the other.
With-
Growing up, this was explicit to me because I have a Korean mom. I will never be white according to the government. I am not white. I can't be white. I can never identify as white. Even though I'm more white than Asian, I am Asian. End of story.
And what would you now on the Korean side? How would Koreans consider you?
White.
They say you're white even if
I
you're
mean,
partly Korean.
My understanding, Koreans are a bit different. They're very racialist, very racial supremacist. So they would find value in the fact that I'm part Korean and be like, oh, wow, but lesser than them. So it's not so much among the younger generation of Koreans,
right?
But the, like 50, like the older you get in terms of Korea, the more racial supremacist they are. And the Korean supremacists, that Koreans, older ones, genuinely believe Koreans are the supreme race. No joke. And it emerged, my understanding.
Not just over whites, but other Asians as well.
Everyone.
Yeah.
They believe they're the superior race of the planet. And the reason they do, my understanding is that when Japan invaded and colonized parts of Asia, the Japanese claimed that they were the supreme race. So Korean resistance countered this by claiming to their children and fighters, no, it's actually us and we'll prove it. Then when Japan ultimately gets repelled and the Koreas, everything happens, it happens, they retained that view that they were supreme. Right. But I got to tell you, when I went to Seoul, one of the funniest things I've seen was in this museum talking about the great naval general or whatever and his tremendous victories over Japan. But as you go step by step through his career, it's like a great victory was had here, and it shows like 50 Korean ships fighting 50 Japanese ships. And then it's like, and he was victorious. And then you jump like a year, and it's like, in the next great battle he won, and there's like 10 Korean ships and 50 Japanese ships. And it's like, so you're saying that for every 5 battles he lost, he won one, and you're only showing me the ones he won. I thought that was actually kind of funny. I was like, what else are you going to do? Be like, we lost a lot. The Japanese took over, and,
So with the D&D game, which one is better? Like, to your point, if they're half elf, half orc, do you want to be half? Do you want to?
My character's half elf.
It depends on how you want to play the game.
Okay.
Like an elf would be quicker.
Powers
and orcs are stronger. You generally.
But the game doesn't naturally favor one or the other. So, like in the half elf, half human thing, you said it was written from a human's perspective.
Yeah.
So it's better to be.
Well, humans don't have any. They're like the most bland general character. They don't really have a lot of bonuses or a lot of negatives.
So
really
it would
basic.
be better to be lumped in with the elves because they're more powerful.
No, because they die. They have less hit points. They're physically weaker, but they're quicker, or they're better with magic. But if you hit them, they die quicker.
Okay.
Let's just get off the Dungeons and Dragons for a bit. We'll jump back to politics.
There's a big movie out. Doing
That's
well.
right. Yeah. Well, we got this.
You fell into it.
This is a big story we got. Well, it just shows the culture of what they're creating.
Yeah, they shouldn't call the movie Dungeons and Dragons. That's the concept of the worlds that you can create a movie about. Like the movie should be called something awesome, The Realm, and then somewhere in there be like a Dungeons and Dragons property.
It does. It is called something, and then they put D&D above it. But let's jump to this story and talk politics. We have this from WEAR News, ABC3. Former congressional candidate Rebecca Jones' son arrested in Santa Rosa County. This is a Democrat. She was like this fake whistleblower, I guess. I don't know most of the details. It's been a while. But she ran as a Democrat. She is now accusing, what did she say? Ron DeSantis kidnapped her son. The true story is that, let me just, we'll jump over here.
Ron DeSantis kidnapped her son.
The government of Florida kidnapped her son, yeah.
Oh, the governor of Florida. So here's a tweet from the Miami Herald. 13-year-old son of Rebecca Jones, whistleblower who clashed with DeSantis, arrested over memes. Memes. Here's what Community Notes added. An incident report released Thursday afternoon by the Santa Rosa Sheriff's Office allege that the 13-year-old made repeated threats to shoot up Holly Navarre Middle School and to stab students who angered him. He also talked about being on antidepressants that weren't working. So that's why he got arrested. Right now, this Rebecca Jones woman, she's blocked me, by the way. She is posting up a storm claiming that, she said, 2 weeks later, bringing us to early today, an officer told me the state issued a warrant for my son's arrest for digital threats of terrorism. I asked on whose orders. The officer said it was the state. They aren't letting him come home tonight. They kidnapped my son. No, it's called arrested, lady. And now she's got a whole bunch of Democrats and leftists being like, this is Ron DeSantis. He's a fascist. This
so the Miami Herald suggested that he was arrested for a political statement,
for
right?
Memes,
yeah.
For memes.
When in fact it was terroristic threats online, allegedly.
Yeah, but when I looked this up, the Pensacola News Journal was the one right under it, and they're like, that's what she's claiming, but let's talk about what actually happened. They have like a list of his statements that he made.
So this is a person, Rebecca Jones, she's the one who accused DeSantis of hiding COVID numbers, is that right? Yeah.
Hey, these are red flag laws. Why is this lady complaining? Her kid got red flagged, baby, and the cops came and arrested him. This is exactly what Democrats have been asking for.
Why wasn't she concerned about her son's death threats?
Because she's evil. These people are evil. Bro,
It was a
like,
rhetorical question. I had
no,
no
but there's an
idea
answer
why she didn't.
because we talk about this so often when I point out here is a woman who knows full well what her son did.
Right.
She is capitalizing off of the fact that her son is reported to have threatened to murder classmates, and she's using it for political power. She tweeted before, I'm getting out of Florida or something like this, and then she never did. Now, why would she say such a thing and then not follow through? Oh, because they're liars. Because she's lying. Then when her son gets arrested because the family is clearly unwell, she says, they kidnapped my son. Mm-hmm. And she's got followers who are eating it up, and she's using this stuff for political gain.
Well, I hope her son gets a lawyer that represents his interest in a way that's better than his mother's doing.
Yeah. There's some reports that he was being homeschooled at the time of his arrest, which, like, to me sometimes implies that kids are being homeschooled for other issues. They're being kept from school.
I'd like to just point out Jazz Jennings' mother and that viral video. Did you see the viral video where Jazz's mother says she wakes up Jazz in the middle of the night with the dilator and lubricates it and says, if you don't stick this in, I will? So the point here is,
thank God I've missed that.
The degree to which these people are willing to go to cause human suffering, if it empowers them in some way, is terrifying. And right now you have a woman whose son is in jail for making terroristic threats. So he is charged and reported. And she's using this for personal gain. Instead of saying, what's going on between me and my family is personal and private, and I'd like to keep it that way, she rushes to social media and says, help, help, they kidnapped my son. Clearly a lie, but she's doing it for political power.
And is it that the son, the heavyset person in that picture?
No, that's one of the images you showed.
I think that's Boogie.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
a YouTuber.
Boogie
2988, is that Boogie?
Yeah.
I think that's
don't know.
Boogie.
I can't tell.
No,
He's lost weight, if that was
He
him.
was at the
Boogie has
top
not lost
before.
weight.
yeah, I think that's the
Has
son
he
right
lost
there.
a little weight?
Oh, that's the
No.
son. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I
she's
think
saying
so.
she got threats. She was worried about her husband and daughter's safety. She had to send them out of the state.
Yeah,
Like,
they to flee.
I don't-
It's just all lies. It's all lies. It's all they do.
when I
Also,
saw
it makes
the-
me sad for her kid, right? Like, if this is how she's responding, my kid's being unfairly kidnapped by the government. Like, if this kid really does have some sort of issue, apparently his parents are not taking it as seriously as they should. They would rather point the finger at the Florida government, I guess.
I was when I started making internet videos in 2006, it was new, and I was like, wow, I'm becoming a cult leader. This is very dangerous. I don't want to be this. I don't want this power. This could easily corrupt me and make me tell people to do something and destroy the entire system. I can't.
Right.
So I put it down because it wasn't right. But the only problem is all these other people are now picking it up and doing it, and they're not ethical.
You recognize that people were paying attention to what you said in a way that you didn't really want them to.
They would yell my name instead
Right.
of the things I was talking about.
Right.
But it's like if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and I don't trust these other weird. Like, no offense, lady, I don't know you, Rebecca, but
Oh, she's weird. She's
obviously acknowledge your kid's problem. If he was threatening his classmates, acknowledge it.
Apparently, I saw messages where he said he was placed on antidepressants, but they weren't working. Clearly, this kid is unwell. I feel bad for him, but man, I can't even read what he said. I don't even think we can pull it up. If I show this, YouTube's going to freak out.
It takes me back to the same solution every time we talk about this kind of stuff. Is that don't be a reactionary. Well, I mean, it's okay to talk about crazy stuff that happens, but if you're just constantly reacting to the bad stuff, you need to create the good stuff. That's the answer. You need to become the famous one. You need to be the one. I'm talking
That's
to myself.
what these people think.
Everyone's thinking it right now, and it is a culture war to seize power.
Well, and when you see
Yeah,
and when
I
you
can't-
see
I despise
politicians embrace a mass shooter, you talk about a contagion. You know, the other folks look at that and say, "Well, I can get similar positive feedback if I go and murder people." These are dangerous positions for.
Look at John Brown.
Yeah.
The story of John Brown is not a good one. I mean, look, slavery was wrong.
Oh, John Brown.
No one
history.
questions
I thought
it.
you meant John Brown. Something happened just now, but
No,
you're
John
talking
Brown.
about history. John Brown.
Went to Kansas with his kids and just started murdering people. John Brown walked up to a guy and shot him in the face. I mean, look, I get it. There are bad things. There are evil things. But it's like, I don't know, man. There are questions about how we handle the problems of greater society. And there is an interesting question about, was John Brown right to just walk up to people? I think the answer is freeing slaves without killing a bunch of people for the sake of killing them is probably the right way to go about things. This was before the war. This was before an attempt to end it. What we're seeing here is the next degree. These people who are planning these things, if this breaks into civil war, they're already martyring these people. They stood in the Tennessee legislature and they all stood there silently holding up 7 fingers in some kind of protest symbol like Hunger Games, representing that the shooter themselves was a victim. That is scary.
Yeah, yeah, and the irony is he was a victim of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, victim of something for sure, like the lack of parental oversight, you know.
I mean, it took 12 hours for me to even figure out whether he was a he or a she. I mean, that's how crazed our media was, that they couldn't tell us with a straight way, the gender, the actual gender, biologic of the murderer.
The sex.
Whatever the language.
Straight up.
I don't even know what word I'm supposed to
sex.
What word am I supposed to say?
Yeah, well, you could be one sex and a different gender.
But the point was everyone is so in fear of this transgender extremism, you can't even get the who, what, when, and why reporting for hours.
Well, it's a fear of far left terrorism. That's just plain and simple. This is what I've been saying.
I mean, what they talk about the Islamists threatening and curtailing free speech in Europe by murdering people who publish the wrong thing.
Who was it recently on
scientist?
It was
Richard
Dawkins.
Yeah,
Dawkins was being interviewed by was it Piers
Morgan? This was nuts.
And he says, "Can you talk about Salman Rushdie?" And he goes, and he's like, well, "You don't want to talk about it?" He goes, and then he's like, are you worried about a backlash?" And he goes, "I don't want to talk about it. I should have made that clear."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, that's sad, isn't it?" And he's like, "I can't."
Ask J.K. Rowling how she's doing in terms of threats and stuff.
But
the point is, I can't imagine her security bills.
There's got to be a way to talk about it with empathy without saying I'm on that side. You don't have to take sides. Empathy doesn't mean that you believe it's right or that you agree with it. It just means you understand. And I think there's a way. But it's hard to empathize with people that are on psychotropics because they're not. It's hard. It's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard.
Well, they don't want us to empathize. I mean, there's no a person of good faith who isn't concerned about someone who feels so crazed about their body that they would mutilate it or do these radical procedures. No one thinks, well, it's good you feel that way. The question is, how is it we treat it? Do we help them, or do we, further that extremism or that unhealthy approach?
Matt Walsh broke it down masterfully in that recent college talk he gave, where he asked a person to explain how they knew they were a woman, and the person just said, because other trans people said they felt similarly to me. And he said, well, that's how trans people feel, but not women. Right. And the person did not know or ask how women actually felt. What they were actually saying is that it's kind of sad. The person just said that they didn't fit in, and they were trying to find a community to fit into, and they did.
And she was getting, or he or she was getting ratified by her friends, said, you're a girl. And Walsh is like, of course they're going to be nice to you. They're your friends.
Yeah.
And, in my view, friends help you, not allow you to kind of go down these paths that are so terrible in the end.
If there was somebody who was anorexic and you don't tell them and get them help, you're a bad person.
Dude, I used to think if people changed their name, I'd be like, what's up, fake guy? Yeah, you're going to go with a fake name now? You got a costume on? Like if you wore a beanie, I'd be like, fake. I don't even like nothing unless it's pure real, it's fake. And then transgender came along and I'm like, fake. But then I realized that's not the way, like I talked to Michael Malice, he's like, it's not that big of a deal. You can have, because I'm like, what's up with your fake name? And he was like, it's not, dude, it's not that big of a deal.
Fake name.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I was smoking a lot of weed and I was like, if it's not exactly real aligned with God, then it is fake and needs to be flushed. But I think there's more of a middle road. No one's real all the time. We have clothing on. We're not like in the buff because that's real. I don't
see how wearing clothes is fake. Like we wear clothes to protect ourselves from like the weather.
But like people wear lipstick and it's like,
that's fake.
What's makeup? I was so anti-makeup. I was just anything that's not purely who you are was pissing me off.
Lipstick is simulating ovulation, isn't it?
Probably.
Yeah. You're like, and the same thing with blush. It's like to show that you are like,
living in that reality where I was so anti-fake was like, it was antisocial. I couldn't, my friends were like, I don't want to be around it. I'm like, you can't lie to her. You need to tell her that you slept around with, and he's like, Ian, I don't even want you in my life because I'm not going to tell my girlfriend I cheated on her. I'm like,
you're like
well,
an atomic bomb in people's relationships.
Honesty, truth. Yes. I think
obsessed. You're right that like honesty and truth are valuable. And especially in friendship, you need to have an ability to speak honestly with people. Right. And I think that's what's the difference between people who feel as though they are not accepted going online and thinking that they are getting an honest reaction when they're actually counting how many likes they get or how many views their video gets. I think those are ways to trick your brain into having a dopamine reaction, but it's very different than if you had a friend who was like, well, I want you to be happy, but I'm concerned. I want you to know that like you don't need to contort yourself to be something you're not. Like, let's work on your self-esteem otherwise. I think it's much easier and sort of less terrifying to seek gratification through social media, which isn't a completely honest form of friendship. You know what I mean?
Well, Dylan Mulvaney, my guess is he has a little bit of talent there somewhere.
I disagree.
There's something that he's able, he would, if he was channeling it directly, he might be successful in a way that would be, in my view, appropriate. But there's this crazed approach. And, people are going to be they're going to do their own thing. That's fine. But stay away from our kids. Don't ask us to ratify it. And don't create entire public policies around it. I mean, someone was telling me the other day that a huge percentage of transgender surgeries are through the military. So, I mean, what's happening in our country that it's, and the numbers were such that one could conclude that people were only joining the military to get the benefit of the surgery.
Is it just people in the military, or is it also their dependents? Because there have been a couple like high-profile cases of military families.
Well, that's a fair question. But the point was the military is funding, and I don't have the exact number in front of me, a substantial portion of transgender surgeries annually in the United States.
It's wild.
I'm glad you brought up Dylan, because I had that same thought earlier when you guys were talking that he's immensely talented, but I feel like it's directed.
What is this?
I didn't say he was immensely talented.
I'll say it, because that's why he's famous right now, is because he's funny to watch to a lot of people. He dances really well. He's a good mover. He has good physical form, but he's gone into this realm of trying to find clicks that's like, I find it shameful, but I mean, I'm not, whatever. But it is. It's like, don't twist things just for views.
And you are incorrect. The videos of Dylan's are spastic. Like,
I know. It's like he's not rooted.
It's not coordinated. It's not good movement. It's random shaking, convulsing, and screaming. Like the Price is Right video. It's just, it is someone who is
It's not, he hasn't developed
neglected.
more since then.
Yeah, like his gut biome all out of whack.
It is someone who is neglected as a child. And I mean this with full sincerity, not to be mean. I believe that Dylan Mulvaney was seriously neglected and as a young child was not being given attention. So desperately lashed out saying, please, please look at me. Then goes on social media and tries making different kinds of content to get attention, to be ostentatious. The Price is Right is the perfect example. When Dylan Mulvaney wins, what does he do? He runs around for 3 minutes doing a weird performance where he dances with a pool stick saying, please look at me. It is a strange, narcissistic desire to be looked at.
It wasn't funny. And it wasn't even.
What's happening now is the only reason this content is getting viewed is because the algorithm on TikTok is pushing it. That's it. End of story.
I got banned from TikTok.
We're banned as well. We're gonna go to Super Chats.
They didn't tell me why. It just cut me off.
We're gonna go to Super Chat. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, and head over to timcast.com. Become a member in order to support our work by being a member and clicking that Join Us button. Go to timcast.com, click Join Us. You can get access to the uncensored members-only show. And if you join at least $25, or if you're a member at $10 for at least 6 months, you get access to the VIP chat room where you could submit questions and potentially be selected to call into the after show. So become a member over there. For now, we will read your Super Chats. All right, let's see what we got. Oh, where are we at? Let's see. Damian Master says, hey, do you guys have any plans to upload in 4K or 1440? Would be nice for bigger screens. I guess the issue is...
What is it now?
1080.
1080.
We did experiment with 4K a while ago, but it's massive in terms of data consumption. Right. It's ridiculously expensive.
It would take us too long.
It's not that it would take us too long. It's that the data cost is just...
To store it and everything.
It's like exponentially more expensive.
You're talking about for this show?
Yeah, for any live stream, you need to understand that to broadcast at 4K it's like the broadcast rate squared.
Do you have the wiring to do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's an issue of cost.
Yeah.
So for if we had like 40 some odd thousand people watching, when we're doing the after show, and like YouTube is fine with it. There's two issues. One, the potential constraint on our network if we push too hard and then we start getting it starts chopping up. Most people don't have 4K screens,
right.
And storing it would be very expensive. And when we do the after show, we would have to switch to 1080 because we couldn't afford to broadcast at 4K.
Yeah.
So it's just like, we just do 1080. You know what I mean? Heck, we could broadcast at 480.
Now, how far are we away technologically and cost-wise from being able to take advantage of the 4K like that?
I think we're very far away, and it may not actually even happen.
They're right on the
And
cusp
they're-
of using photons instead of electrons for circuitry, so that will change a lot.
It could, and there's also new compression technology that comes out and reduces the data load and things like that. But the issue is the difference from 1080 on the standard small screen to 4K is indistinguishable for the most part to people. So when you're watching on your phone, where half of people watch, or a small laptop screen, some people have big TVs, and so they're like, 1080 sucks. But that's like a small percentage of people, and I don't think anytime soon you are going to see a massive upgrade in demand for 4K.
It's not like HD or something. Yeah.
But, a lot of people, like, phones are becoming 4K, and so I think we need better compression, better data transmission. For the time being, it's too expensive.
Interesting.
All right, let's see where we are. All right. Robert Knight says, Tim, we had a trans school shooter thwarted in Colorado Springs today. Called in by his sister and law enforcement showed up. They were drunk in room. We did cover that story. That's crazy. And people mentioning Fluffer Boy says there was potentially a copycat. Yep. Yeah. Stevie Vivi says, don't forget when Anheuser-Busch merged with a Belgian company, INBEV. The list of AB brands is much larger than you stated in your other video.
Thanks for bringing that up. It's AB InBev. It's bought, and they have other. What do we got here? There's quite a few. They own 4 companies: SAB Miller, Ambev.
They own
and InBev. Yeah, they own. What was it? SAB Miller.
You're gonna have to stop drinking alcohol.
There's
no
quite
more
a lot.
beer.
I saw some here.
Local only.
Out of the United States, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, I think, are bottled by these guys. I'll keep naming them as I find them.
And that's the trouble with boycotts.
You're not ready to give it up?
This is we got an interesting one here from Spencer Jones. Says, I was the editor on those Jack Daniels videos. Jack Daniels had us cut most of the dirty jokes the drag queens made. At least I got paid. Interesting.
Huh.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people are saying they're going to ban Jack Daniels.
Jack Daniels did a drag thing too.
RuPaul's Drag Race, but I'm kind of like, I don't care if adults are doing drag at all. Like, if Jack Daniels wants to sponsor him, I don't drink Jack Daniels. I don't care. The Dylan Mulvaney thing is that they're sponsoring someone who's targeting children, and that's where I'm like, that's not okay. If drag queens want to do it, if Jack Daniels is like, hey, there's drag queens and they drink booze, I'm like, okay, I don't know. I'm not gonna. But if you want to boycott Jack Daniels, by all means, go do your thing. The Anheuser-Busch thing, I think, is like, people need to boycott that, because that's not just about targeting kids. That's where we need cultural awareness of the algorithmic manipulation that our society is experiencing and the destruction it will bring. All right, where are we at? What do we have? Dave Davis says, well, there are people in both parties that want a divorce. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants a national divorce, and if Trump won in 2020, California wanted a national divorce. This isn't just one side wanting a divorce, which is why I say I think that's where we're going. And it's just funny when people are like, oh, yeah, it's crazy, that'll never happen. And I'm like, bro, the left and the right are calling for it.
Did Marjorie call for it? Because I remember last time she was on, I think she said she didn't want it.
She recently said that we need a national divorce.
Marjorie, what about your kids, man?
Well, I remember reading in the New York Times in 2020 how they were gaming out a disputed election, and John Podesta, who's now working in the Biden White House, playing the role of Joe Biden or Hillary at the time, I think it was Joe, said that, when they gamed it out and there was Trump, quote, won, and there was an electoral college dispute, the Podesta position was, well, we should have Washington State and California,
Oregon,
threaten to secede from the Union.
Yes.
Unless the electors were counted the way they wanted to count. So for all of the noise about January 6th, the left was actually wargaming secession and civil war in the 2020 election. And only because the votes went the way they wanted it to go, and we can argue about that, did they pull back on their plans for violence, street demonstrations, and potential secession.
All right. Kid Funky Fry says, what Obama did wasn't a war crime. It was a capital crime under 9-141.000.
The son of an FBI informant. You know, we had gotten documents on Anwar al-Awlaki, his father, who was the first American ever assassinated by a U.S. president.
Wow.
Known. And Anwar al-Awlaki was actually working as a source for the government at the time. We had the FBI documents saying, well, we followed him in the, literally, followed subject. He got on the metro. We broke off contact after he went into the Pentagon.
Really?
And so Obama, a few years later, he's across, he was the leading internet jihadi, and Obama killed him. Whether Obama knew at the time that he was actually a source for a good period of time for the United States government, I don't know.
Or maybe he was cleaning up some loose ends.
Yeah, well.
Yep. All right. Brandon West says the state is a mafia pretending to be a human rights organization. Yep. All right. Hillbilly Clinton says if they're going to go after the Bidens, then Hunter first, and then everyone will finally see how incompetent Joe is. If you can't father one, how are you supposed to father a nation? I mean, just lock them all up. Indict them all. That's about it.
Obama, Hillary, Bill.
Yep.
I mean, the new rules are local prosecutors can attach state law crimes to federal issues and prosecute national politicians.
Do you think they will, though? Like, what are the odds here? I'd love to see it happen, but what are the odds?
I wouldn't bet on it. We got this in the regular chat, Holyverse. I saw this one said Tim should get Natalie /ContraPoints.
Although, to be clear, I think there's enough that the state actors could get. State attorneys or district attorneys could get the Bidens.
So Holyverse was saying that we should get ContraPoints. ContraPoints has been invited on several occasions. There you go. Yeah, we invite lefty people all the time.
Who's ContraPoints?
A prominent YouTuber, a trans woman who talks about various political issues. Relatively popular, fairly moderate in some respects, but lefty. And, well, come on. We've invited Politics Girl, who's a Midas Touch podcaster. They responded with like, what's the deal? And we're like, here's the plan. Ghosted us. Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks obviously won't do it. Hassan Piker won't do it. Kyle Kalinske, we like him. He's cool. He said he wants to find a time to come out and do it, but it's hard because he hosts his own show. And I'll say that for Cenk Uygur and Hassan Piker as well. If they host their own show, I'm not going to cry that they can't stop their show to do mine. Like, that's unfair. But they're and Politics Girl, and
Can't you zoom them in or something like that? Do
no,
studio?
It just doesn't work.
You can't do it.
You can't have a conversation with someone over a screen because you can't see each other's faces. So it becomes this weird thing where someone just talks and then stops and pauses, and then someone talks and then stops and pauses, and it's just really awful. I hate it. And there's a lot of people who are like, I don't know, you could still do it. It's like, ugh. Like even we had Don Jr. calling last week. I'm like, we got the Discord set up. We can now do call-ins, but I don't want to do it on the show. It was great to have Don Jr. opine on all of these issues pertaining to the indictment and what was going on.
Right.
Plus his dad is, the front runner. So I'm like, let's hear what he has to say. And then we were able to try and get some questions in, but it's hard because Don can't see us. So when we're talking or when we're trying to talk, he can't hear us either. So he's talking and then someone tries to bring up a point and it's impossible.
It becomes a show rather than a discussion.
Yeah. So it's just, we want someone to sit down, have a real conversation with a group of people and talk about things. But I think we're having the dude from Surfs TV, who is a smaller YouTuber, but he's more prominent on Twitter. And then he'll be here. We had Destiny, the Omni-Liberal, on the last week. And he was in for a surprise, I imagine, because when he was on the show, he said, the indictment of Donald Trump must have something bigger in it if it's going to be 34 counts. They've got to have some more, evidence. And they didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder what his view is now. Yeah. Seeing as they have nothing.
He should come back. Let's hear an update from him.
Well, I think I like Destiny. I mean, you don't have to agree with him or agree with his worldview, but like, I felt like we had a real conversation. We don't agree on everything. He thinks things that are untrue or doesn't know things that we know, and vice versa.
Yeah, we started talking about corporate colonialism because he was like, we haven't taken another country like Russia state yet. I'm like, well, it's corporate colonialism, and it's unresolved. We need to resolve this, Steve.
But like he said, Kyle Rittenhouse was the clearest cut case of self-defense he's ever seen. He may be liberal, but he's not lying when he watches the video. He's like, oh yeah, you're right.
He's not delusional.
Yeah.
Pardon me, Steve.
Yeah, you got to respect people who don't check their brains at the door when it comes to politics. That they're going to just repeat you know,
But-
the NPC approach, and that goes on both sides.
But there's the issue. If someone like Destiny is getting his news from corporate press, he's likely to believe things that are untrue. However, Destiny is more likely to actually watch the video, and that puts him in, I guess he's called right wing. The left views
I mean,
him
did
as
you
a
see
right-wing.
this? Glenn Greenwald of the Washington Post the other day accused the Trump sons of posting the picture of the judge's daughter. In fact, that was so misleading that he got fact-checked on Twitter. I mean, they posted articles about the daughter that happened to include a picture.
And then they lied.
Completely at odds. And he's supposedly the fact-checker.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's what they do. They lie about everything. So that's yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Fact-checking is a really big problem in the media.
S.A. Federali says, it's a sucking chest wound. Lukeisms are alive and well. I don't understand what that means. A sucking chest wound is the specific term for what it is. That's what it's called. When you get a hole in your chest, it's called a sucking chest wound. But
that's one of those internet rabbit holes you'll probably...
Well, no, he's talking about Luke Rudkowski, who used to come on the show and say things that didn't quite make sense, but you kind of understood.
Yeah.
So calling it a Lukeism is to imply the phrase sucking chest wound is incorrect when it's actually the correct terminology. Yep. A Canadian Egg says, regarding stab wounds, take a driver's license, credit card, or equivalent and place it over the wound to seal it. Source, surviving edged weapons, police training video. Yeah. There you go. That sounds horrifying, man.
Yeah.
Could you imagine like getting stabbed and you're holding a driver's license on your chest, knowing that if you take it off, you will die?
Ugh.
Well, that's one. I have a woofer. I've done my woofer training. That's one of the hardest parts about not self-inflicted injuries, but injuries to yourself. You can't really. It's really difficult to take care of yourself and administer first aid to yourself. It's really, really difficult.
Knives are deadly weapons.
Yeah, definitely are.
Yep, it's funny when the saying of "don't bring a knife to a gunfight." It's actually like, do you know anything about combat? Because
yeah, right.
Like depending on the circumstances of the fight, the knife might be worse.
Oh yeah, close so much more distance, so much faster.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then people, I feel like a lot of people, especially talking about this, they've never gone to a gun range, a shooting range. You know what I mean? And like,
no, probably not.
Actually fired a weapon, and it's like you do realize that. Watch a video of these cops. And the cops are shooting, and it's like you have this tiny piece of matter you are trying to hit a person with, and you're far away, compared to literally holding and controlling the knife and the person as you're ending them. Like knives are very, very dangerous. Be careful.
So I'm not a much of a gun guy. So I've done shooting once, really, 10 years ago. But, you know, for those of you who have used weapons and, you know, you've used guns, right? Been trained. I mean, is a knife an effective personal defense weapon if you're not comfortable with guns?
I would probably, well, it depends on the circumstances. Probably no in most respects. However, and it's because you don't want to be in an actual grappling fight with someone.
So it requires you to be too close to the assailant.
And it creates massive risk to yourself. That being said, I want you to imagine it this way. You're standing 15 feet from a target with a bullseye on it. If you were handed a firearm and told, hit the bullseye, go. Okay, the chances of the average person doing that is slim to none. You hand the same average person a knife and say, hit the bullseye, go. They will hit the bullseye. 100% of people.
Go to the target and stab it.
And right in the bullseye.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to do it. But with a gun, they'll probably miss. They'll make simple mistakes. And so a gun is a very powerful and effective weapon in most circumstances. If you're talking about home defense, you probably don't want a knife. You want something like, which it's funny because they're banning the effective home defense weapons. Like, you know, I guess a short barreled rifle with, actually people mention the Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which was used by the trans mass shooter. It's a 9mm rifle with a brace. So it's stabilizing, lower, smaller round, 9mm. Lower penetration, or less over penetration. So if you're worried about, you know, someone breaking into your house and you don't want to hurt other people, you want a weapon like that. I think if someone were to break into my house, I wouldn't want to be using a knife because that means you're actually in physical contact with the person, increasing risk to yourself.
And my guess is just brandishing. You know, I know the left doesn't like to talk about the effective use of guns. They're often effective just showing them in terms of self-defense, brandishing them without having to fire them sends a lot of people running them.
SA Federale clarified when you said earlier we're talking about a sucking chest wound that you said a chest sucking wound, and that's
is that
why
what it
they,
was?
Yeah, that's why they super chatted. The
okay. There you go.
You played the
I
Luke
mixed it up.
card.
I think it's because I was calling it a chest wound, and then I was trying to because most people don't know what sucking chest wound means. Yeah. All right. Lillian May says, "Are you old enough to remember the movie Escape from L.A., a life imitating art, a premonition of the future?"
I'm old enough to remember Escape from New York.
Yeah. What is it? Snake Plissken. Yeah.
That's
Plissken.
Metal Gear. That's where the Metal Gear character comes from.
He lands on the roof or whatever, and then
Before that, the big movie was controversial. Was The Warriors.
Great movie.
The Warriors.
Awesome movie.
Warriors, yeah.
I mean, it's a bit cheesy. It's nonstop
The
action.
gangs of New York in the 70s.
Dude, the Warriors is nuts.
The Spence Fencer says a bill introduced in Texas to outlaw child genital mutilation, male circumcision is explicitly exempted and will remain legal. Why chop boys still? Good question. It shouldn't be allowed.
Well, you know what? If you want to compare circumcision to gender mutilation of the nature we're talking about, you can try. I don't think it's going to be persuasive.
One is sterilization. One is, an unnecessary surgery, I guess. I don't think they should be doing it, but there's a difference between sterilizing a human being and circumcision.
You can't experiment on patients. That's the distinction. There's no basis to suggest that what they're doing to people who think they're transgendered is anything other than crazed experimentation.
Well,
and you're prohibited. No one can. You can't
Tom,
participate at low. You can't legally participate in that type of process. Nor can doctors.
Tom, I got to stop you right there. You're completely wrong.
How am I completely wrong?
Scandinavian countries in the UK have already banned it. It's not experimental. It doesn't work at all.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
So Tavistock in the UK shut down and said this stuff is hurting the kids and not helping them.
And how do you...
So we're beyond that. We know it doesn't work, and they're doing it anyway.
And there's no way you can test it to make sure it will work because
They did, though.
It's the type of procedure that is unethical to perform.
Well, but listen.
Just inherently. So you can't... It's like testing whether cutting an arm off works.
They did
do it.
But they did.
Right.
In Europe, they did these things,
right.
Tracked the data, and then found it had a negative impact and said, we're going to stop doing this from now on. And they've actually told their counterparts in the U.S. to stop doing it as well. And when Republicans said, look at what these countries are doing, we should stop, Democrats, for some reason, love to come out and say, if the Republicans are for it, we're against it. And then started defending something that has already been shown by socialist or democratic socialist countries to not be effective. So at this point, I would say it's not even experimental. It's proven to have failed.
Right.
And they're still pursuing it.
Right.
But that's why so here's the interesting thing I have for pointing out to YouTube. Multiple states have already banned this outright. These other countries in Europe have banned it. Now, many states in the US are banning it, but for some reason, the left is still adamant they need to be able to do it.
And they point to the American Academy of Pediatrics and all of these institutions that they say, oh no, they say it's the right thing to do.
Our public health authorities have failed us.
Oh, well,
on
that's
so many issues. On so many issues.
All right, let's grab some more super chats. All right, what is this? Marcus Carter says, I wrote a book I wanted to share with you and hope you read. Reclaiming Independence, Discovering the Lost Duties of Leadership is available in bookstores now. Very cool, very cool.
Congratulations.
Hale Hertz says, it's awfuls behind all of it. And of course, that stands for affluent white female liberals. Mm-hmm. That's what, it was really funny when Tucker Carlson brought that up. He's like, they called me racist. And he's like, why? It's white liberal women I'm complaining about. He's like, I don't care about black people. The white liberal women. It's like, I thought that was really funny. Yeah. Like the left is complaining about white men and Tucker's complaining about white women.
Yeah, I was watching that Big J. Okerson stand-up last night we were talking about. He talks about the only people that have ever called him racist are just white girls.
Well, and that's why you have a lot of the homosexual community oppose this transgenderism because they see homosexual boys as being
it's erasure
targeted here.
Yeah,
these are kids that don't want or shouldn't have these types of surgeries, and what's going on? Why? And of course they're the ones who are regretting it later, so they say.
All right, Miles Tetik says, y'all underestimate how much is involved with printing a run of custom beer cans. Not likely a marketing team slipped that by everyone else. Q2 reporting going to be wild. I just want y'all to check out Life Leaf Remedies and feel better today. So, no, yeah, I think what's happening is millennials are starting to take over industry, and they're pushing more and more of this weird ideological stuff. And then you have the opposing faction, people who pay attention to politics, who are just like, this is weird and I don't like it. So you have some millennials, some Gen X, some boomers, and they're all saying, whoa, this is weird and offensive, and it's causing problems for the company now. But we'll see. Anheuser-Busch's revenue, I think, was like $55 billion.
So, but the left doesn't care. I mean, it's not going to stop them.
Oh, they don't care if Budweiser loses money.
That's fine with them. They don't. They've gotten what they needed.
Exactly. So when Budweiser gets they're not going to buy Budweiser.
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows what they're drinking? All right. Winston Alexander says, as a half Korean, half white guy, I went from being a banana to mellow yellow to a person of color to white adjacent. What's next? LOL. Apparently now, according to Dungeons and Dragons, just Korean. You are no longer white in any capacity.
Although the more we talk about Budweiser, the more I'm thinking, boy, I could use a Budweiser.
All right. St. Miles says, Tim, make your own brew and have Joe and Crowder slam a glass mug after they drink it. I wish we could. That is very difficult to do beer. We could probably partner with actually, we were talking about doing this as a local brewery. And we were like, maybe they could craft a specialty beer for us, and then we would sell it or have it at the studio or something. And they were super down with it. We just never got around to it. I think it's mostly because I don't drink beer. It makes you fat and it's poison. So, I'm just not going to drink it. So we never did. Coffee's good, however. I like coffee. Coffee's fun.
There's this tribe in Central America that runs for like 17 hours a day called the Tara Umara, and they drink corn beer. That's their diet. As long as you burn it off, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is alcoholic?
Moonshine?
Yeah.
How do you make corn beer?
No, it's corn beer.
It just ferments, I think, right?
Yeah,
It's like anything
it's
else.
all sugar, right? Yeah.
I feel like it'd be difficult to make beer because you don't drink it. Like, what coffees you like, so you can say to your people, this is a nice coffee, you should get it too. Beer would be harder for our gang, I guess.
Kermode Bear says, drop D&D and Pathfinder. There are many great non-woke options. Castles and Crusades, Blades in the Dark, Cult Divinity Lost, and the old World of Darkness settings. You don't need Wizards of the Coast to have fun.
Castles and Crusades sounds cool.
Ian, you know any of this?
No. I know Pathfinder and D&D. I haven't heard of Castles and Crusades.
We got to do that Culture War D&D show.
If we can get some D&D players, I would love to.
That's the challenge. The idea was to do a D&D show that has silly analogs to the real world to see how people respond to situations and understand see if they can see through it.
So you'd be running a D&D game using modern
You'd be like,
challenges. That's pretty fun.
A group of, orcs are rampaging through the city center complaining about an orc warrior who had been imprisoned and then disappeared. And a young elf was rendering aid when he was violently attacked and then fired his bow and arrow upon the attackers, fled the scene, and then you're like, what are you doing?
Right. That couldn't happen in real life.
The goblins that live underground.
Yeah, and then there you go.
Dude, the sewers would be such a
that can't happen in real life. That's
theater.
too crazy.
All right. Heavy Arm Sky says, I want to run a D&D campaign for the Timcast crew with all the politically incorrect stuff intact just to stick it to Wizards of the Coast. If we do a D&D show, it's got to be on Rumble.
I think none of it's politically incorrect. I mean, it's insanity. This isn't even...
I never thought of it as
politically
you can make
incorrect.
D&D games political, but the game itself isn't inherently political. It's just a tab. It's like a layout of data.
Yeah, it's what they're reading into it. It's the lens through which they view their own world they're applying to the game.
Yeah. Communists, everything's political for the communists.
The game is human-centric. That is important because that is political. The whole game, you call a half-human, half-elf a half-elf, it means that there's some human bias in there. And that's the point of it is we're all humans, so that's why.
Right, but you got to understand, Ian, all of the elves who want to play this game are very upset.
They're pissed.
That's right.
That's where this is all coming from.
right.
It's the elves.
It's the big elf lobby.
What is
much
the
love for the
marginalized community or indigenous community that we're all supposed to be offended for?
Probably
elves.
like the dark elves or like the dark dwarves, the underdark.
All right, let's grab this one right here. We've got this from Polite Rude Guy who says, Tim never read my super chats. Also bring Trump on. Yes, I would love to have Trump on the show. No
one's saying no to that one.
I think it's funny when
would you go down? Could you go down there and interview him?
Oh yeah. But it's an issue of he's like a busy guy running for president, and people, everyone we've talked to who's associated with the Trump team or people we've had Jason Miller here a couple times, I think. Yeah. They're like, you'll get 20 or 30 minutes, and I'm like, we'll take it. And then what we'll do is we'll have Don Jr. or Kash Patel hang out with us while we're talking to Trump. Trump can get up and leave and go do his thing, and we'll carry on the show. And it's just an issue of scheduling and coordinating it is very difficult. That's about it.
My guess is he'd commit to 20 minutes, but then he'd stick around and keep.
I think he wouldn't leave. I think.
No, he'd love this sort of format.
Yeah, with
It's a good
people,
format.
the whole chat would be saying, "We love you," and then Trump would be explaining everything in great detail. We would ask him questions to elaborate. He'd elaborate in greater detail. And everyone we've ever had on who's like, "I can stick around for maybe an hour," and we'll be like, "Okay, that's fine." After an hour, they're like, "Well, I'm not leaving." You know, I'm like, "This is going well." You know, I'm getting the dogs right. So, you know, we are. I don't think I should say who, but next week we are going to have the greatest guest we have ever had. I'm very excited.
Other than me?
Other than you.
Technically, yeah.
I am making sure to pull out.
Sorry,
Just to
Tom.
clarify.
We are pulling out all the stops to make sure that this guest receives the utmost comfort. And I'm not going to say who, but next week is going to be lit. We're going to be in Austin. So we've got Monday, a really great guest. It's going to be a very, very fascinating conversation academically about wokeness. Tuesday is going to be my favorite show we will probably ever do. I'm very, very excited for this. It is one of the greatest human people know who it's going to be. As soon as I say this, it is probably the only politician I could ever say that I actually like.
So it's political.
Oh, it's absolutely political.
Yeah.
It's the greatest politician I've seen in my lifetime, and everyone already knows that we're in Texas and who's it going to be. That's all I'm going to say. So there you go, guys. I'm really excited for this. It's going to be one of the most exciting days for me, and I think I'm pretty sure Luke will be there as well. So I'll leave it at that. So smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the show with your friends, become a member at timcast.com. Go to timcast.com, click join us, sign up. We're going to have a members-only uncensored show live on the front page at about 10 p.m. Maybe we'll talk a bit about what's going on next week and who's going to be on the show, because it's going to be amazing. We got an amazing lineup next week in Austin. So go to timcast.com, watch the uncensored after show at 10 p.m. Follow the show at Timcast IRL on Instagram. You can follow me personally at Timcast basically everywhere. Tom, do you want to shout anything out?
Go to judicialwatch.org. We're suing everybody about everything. We got to address the current crisis, and we only do it with your support. So, you know, we got to pay the lawyers, so support Judicial Watch.
Right on. Absolutely.
We're suing everybody about everything is just an amazing t-shirt. I hope that you guys make that as merch.
Yeah, people say, "Are you investigating this?" I say, "We're investigating everything." If there's something you're worried about,
you're
we're
like Oprah
investigating
being like,
it.
everybody gets a lawsuit.
That's true.
I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for this cool site called timcast.com. You should go check it out. Follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. You can see my work from Cassandra Fairbanks McDonald. You can see stuff from Chris Bertman. I know he's a cult favorite.
Yes.
If you want to follow me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at hannahclaire.b, and you can follow me on Twitter at HCBrimlow. Thanks so much.
Hey, Ian Crossland, if you want to follow me, it's here at Ian Crossland anywhere on the internet. I stand in solidarity with all the half-elves and orcs out there. I'm with you till the end, my friends. Tom, if people want to follow you, they can follow you on Twitter at Tom Fitton.
At Tom Fitton.
Thanks for coming, man.
You're welcome.
I have a lot of work to do for the next couple days for this Austin show. It's going to be really fun. But yeah, you guys will enjoy this guest. I think the chat kind of figured it out.
Yeah, they're saying Beto O'Rourke. You got us. Oh, you got me.
Tim's favorite politician of all time.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But, you know, I never officially announced, because who knows? I mean, maybe next week there's like, sorry, we got to cancel. So
Right.
Also, you have to have the anticipation. It's the
Say
it's the
scheduled
magic.
to appear.
maybe they're guessing wrong. I mean, they don't. I
You guys don't know everything.
know. All right. Did you shout out your?
Oh, yeah, at IamSurge.com. I won't be here tomorrow. Kellen will be taking over for me, and we will be driving 22 hours to Texas in a car. It's going to be great.
All right, everybody. We will see you all at timcast.com in about 10 minutes. Thanks for hanging out.
Cheers.